afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Benvenuti a tutti. I thank you very much, vi ringrazio to be so many today at High Hotel for this conference on Eastern Europe. Thank you very much for being here. You know, it's not easy to be so early in the afternoon in Rome without parking, etc. Thank you very much. Today we are going to address some relevant issues of a general interest. And experience shows that a good conversation with outstanding experts on strategic scenarios and in a spirit of respect can be very useful and give a sense of direction. It will not be easy, of course, to draw conclusions in such a complex environment. The Foundation is 14 years old, has a good experience and a habit to develop projects of strategic interest from a Euro-Atlantic perspective. Eastern Europe is at the center of attention in recent history, and history is unfolding before our eyes. There is no need of a long description of that. We started dedicating our attention since the start of the research of the Foundation, taking into account also Russia and adopting a vision encompassing the Balkans and the Black Sea. The most important case in point today is Ukraine, as we all know. It's a very significant and relevant country, rich in humanity and history that we try to support as much as we can. The country, we know, is living a tragic moment due to the completely unjustified Russian aggression that took place already more than 3 years ago. If we look at the big picture, this is my personal opinion at least, Ukraine fits into the general trend and aspiration in Central and Eastern Europe to embrace European democracies, the rule of law, and the free market. In other words, a desire to be as close as possible and to join the Euro-Atlantic institutions. I am convinced, and I like to emphasize that today, that the transatlantic bond remains central to our values and our interest, to our view of the world. And NATO is at the center of this view and is going to remain there. I have no doubt about that. Today we have an ambitious program because we are going to analyze a complex situation from very different angles. We will address first the present scenario, where the relationship with the European Union and NATO is central. And we know that the process of inclusion in the European Union is already underway. We are then going to focus on the outstanding issue of the reconstruction of Ukraine. It has many different aspects, from the financial package to the use of various kinds of resources, the main objectives of the process, and the possible timing. And we know that it's very difficult to envisage this at this time. But in any case, this is an effort that is a priority for the international community. Eastern Europe comes from a difficult history. There is no need to go into that too much. So we have to look at the future, putting the development of civil society as a central place. Again, it is not an easy task, because it involves separate aspects, like combating illicit trade, criminal activity, but promoting resilience, civil reforms, the rule of law, and the free market. It is an ongoing process underway where many actors are concerned. The agenda is very dense because we are doing our best efforts to have a qualified public on an overview in a difficult scenario. I would like also to draw the attention of the audience on the fact this conference takes place about 3 months before a very important international conference taking place in Rome on July 10 and 11 on the reconstruction of Ukraine. So this is a very important thing. In the adjacent room, there is a coffee break available if you like, if you want some refreshment, and have a get-together aperitif at the end of the conference. I thank you. I thank all those who have supported the project and made it possible. with special thanks to Philip Morris International, an old friend. I thank the Compagnia di San Paolo, ICID, Ken Kitatani is here, MBDA, and of course, the NATO Defense College. Our media partners today are IDN, Kronos, and Formica. Thanks to them. And in the end, last but not least, I would like to thank the staff of the Foundation for their enthusiasm and their hard work. Thank you for your attention. Buon pomeriggio a tutti e buon lavoro. Grazie.
Good afternoon, dear participants of this high-level conference. My name is Alexander Prokhorovich. I'm from Ukraine, and as a co-chair of Customs and Trade Facilitation Committee in American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine, I can say that recent decisions made by US administration on customs tariffs are not aligned with our committee's priorities, especially on trade facilitation. Well, it's a joke, but at the same time, we have a separate priority to fight with illicit trade and illegal import of commodities for ensuring development of bona fide taxpayers in Ukraine, our member companies. A competitive, innovative, and secure Europe does not begin or stop at its border. It is important for the EU to have neighbors, and especially EU accession candidates, that are also focusing on competitiveness, innovation, and security as the cornerstones of their readiness to join the European single market. Ukraine is an accession country that has the added huge challenge of fighting a war on its territory as a result of Russian invasion. Illicit trade has emerged as one of the greatest common enemies of both for Ukraine and the EU, complicating and slowing down the accession process, increasing criminality and instability in the region. For example, tobacco market. Just today in the morning, a new report was published regarding the level of illicit tobacco market in Ukraine. And the main conclusion is that after a year of decline, the shadow market is growing, unfortunately. Based on this report, in February this year, the volume of illegal cigarettes increased to 14%, which means more than 500,000 state losses annually. That is why government should focus on eliminating such threats for prosperity of nations and development of economies. I wish all the participants and speakers of this conference for productive and fruitful discussions during today's conference and create synergy of thoughts. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, buongiorno. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today. I am particularly grateful to the NATO Defense College Foundation for organizing this event and for the invitation to be with you. For those of you I have not yet met, my name is Suzanne Nielsen, and I became the Dean of the NATO Defense College almost 2 months ago. When I was first deciding to apply, I was compelled by the college's mission, which, as many of you know, is to contribute to the effectiveness and cohesion of the alliance, primarily through senior level education on transatlantic security issues, enabled by research on matters relevant to the alliance, and supported by engagement with allies, partners, and non-NATO entities with a 360-degree approach. Given the dynamism and complexity of our strategic environment, I believe that accomplishing this mission is more important now than it ever has been. As I looked over the program for today's event, I was struck by the extent to which it raises issues that illuminate both the challenges and the importance associated with accomplishing the mission of the NATO Defense College today. Perhaps most strikingly, war has returned to the continent of Europe with Russia's invasion of Ukraine. This state of affairs has returned NATO to its origins, again making the need to ensure the successful deterrence and defense of the Euro-Atlantic area a first priority. As the needs and priorities of the alliance change, the NATO Defense College also adapts. These changes in the strategic environment, as well as changes in the character of war that have been evident in the war in Ukraine, have been major drivers of the new senior course curriculum that is currently being implemented at the NATO Defense College. Today's planned sessions on the EU and NATO, as well as on the reconstruction of Ukraine, also call to mind key issues that we at the NATO Defense College must address as we prepare the senior military and civilian leaders in our courses to most effectively serve in and partner with the alliance. In addition to imparting knowledge, we also work to foster skills and the cultural awareness that not only build cohesion and transatlantic solidarity, but also enable the effective partnerships essential to success in today's world. These partnerships may be among intergovernmental organizations, such as the European Union and NATO, or with other actors, including those from the private sector. Sometimes in the activities that we engage in our professional lives, we hope that we will also have productive networks of colleges and friends that result. At the NATO Defense College, this is more than just a byproduct. It's central to what we do. We not only seek to foster what our commandant calls human interoperability, but in all our activities, we seek to build community among allies, partners, and non-NATO entities who are stakeholders in the Euro-Atlantic and in global peace and security. The final session on today's agenda on blended threats and regional resilience reflects well the demands of strategic thinking in today's world. We need to further the development of military and civilian leaders who think holistically and who can navigate uncertainty and complexity in our pursuit of the security of states and of the well-being of our populations. As we pursue a better future, we must acknowledge the significance of political, economic, social, and cultural, as well as military considerations. Overall, this conference provides an ideal opportunity to discuss how NATO and its partners can collaborate better together on addressing combined threats emanating from state and non-state actors in a wider Eastern Europe. I'm very much looking forward to the discussions to come. Grazie.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm always delighted to be at a conference, particularly at the beginning where there are more people in the audience than on the panel. In my NATO career, I was often in the reverse situation. So delighted to see such a big audience, which I think shows the keen interest in the topic today. Normally when I have the privilege of being invited to Rome, it's to look at the Mediterranean, Africa, the Middle East. Geography is destiny, Napoleon once said. So I'm delighted also to be today in Italy to discuss Eastern Europe, because Eastern Europe is a problem for all of us in Europe and the transatlantic community, and not just for the Eastern Europeans. So congratulations, Alessandro Ministerizo, my former boss as Deputy Secretary General, and the NATO Foundation for broadening our horizon today. Last time that Alessandro kindly invited me, and by the way, I'm Jamie Shea, a former NATO official, I was a speaker. And so I was a bit intrigued when I got the invitation to be the chair of today's panel. I wondered, is this a promotion from being a speaker because I was so good last time, or was I so bad that it's a demotion? But anyway, so be it. I'm really very, very pleased to be able to introduce four excellent speakers to you. Three are in the room. The fourth from Kiev, Oksana Odsacha, will be with us soon if she's not up there already. And she will be the fourth person to intervene today. It's going to have to be fast and furious, ladies and gentlemen, because we have one short hour and a lot to get through. All I will say in just 1 minute to frame our discussion is that, you know, it can be very frustrating to be an official or a diplomat, because all of the things that you spent your career over decades working on, and where you thought that, not because of you, but because of the work of your institution, you'd achieved a kind of definitive, lasting, permanent result, can suddenly unravel. And Alessandro, from our time at NATO, will remember that for a while after the Cold War, Eastern Europe was a fantastic success story for all of us, both in NATO and the EU. The spread of democracy, the fall of communism, all of kinds of neighborhood and partnership policies, the progressive enlargements of the two institutions, the projection of security and stability, opening up the prospect of further enlargements beyond what we might have thought was classical Europe, to Ukraine, to Georgia, to Moldova. The interventions in the Balkans in the 90s, which were difficult, but which brought about through NATO and then the EU with forces on the ground a degree of stabilization. We thought that, you know, that was a kind of final success story, that never again would the status, the security status of Eastern Europe be challenged. And so it's frustrating, but we are where we are, that today in 2025 we have to recognize that anything that you do is always provisional. As Edmund Burke, you may be familiar with him, famous 18th century UK politician, once said, that rage and frenzy can tear down in half an hour what prudence, foresight and determination cannot build up in 100 years. The war in Ukraine, and how do we still ensure that that brings an outcome that is consistent with the independence and sovereignty of Ukraine, but also the security of the wider Europe. The fact that now security in Eastern Europe is going to cost both NATO and the EU far more capabilities and far more money for a longer period than we'd hoped at the time when a partnership with Russia still seemed possible. We still have tensions in the region, particularly, for example, if you look at the Western Balkans today. We unfortunately look at Georgia, see democratic backsliding as well. And if the military threats were not big enough, there is also, of course, all of these hybrid warfare activities, which pose the issue of how resilient is the region to cope with the full panoply of threats that we see. It's not easy to make progress at a time of war, but the question is still there, to what degree, when one looks at the reconstruction of Ukraine, the future of EU enlargement, the future of NATO enlargement to the region, to what degree can we still keep that momentum going in the hope that sooner or later, one day, we'll be able to relive the 1990s rather than to have the endless terror of a continuation of 2022 to 2025. So that is really the exam question for our speakers today, to try to give us not just analysis, but a sense of where do we go from here. There's a famous Irish joke, of course, about getting lost in Ireland and asking a man coming out of a pub, how do I get to Ballymurphy? And he says, I would not start from here. But of course, in politics, one has to start from where one is, no matter how uncomfortable. Well, part of the issue, as we well know, is that Europe has to take more responsibility for its defence and security. We've heard that message from Secretary of Defence Hegseth and from Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Brussels abundantly in the last few weeks. So how does Europe then start taking responsibility for its defence and security, above all by building capabilities? And that's where I'm delighted to introduce as our first speaker today, Giuseppe Cossiga, who is the president of Aerospace and Defence Industries Rome, but also, of course, of the MBVA Defence Consortium, which is one of the success stories in building European defence capabilities. We know that there is now money for European defence, at least from recent meetings of the EU, but how can those Euro notes be turned into real capabilities, and what is the best financial mechanism, but also the best way to get industry to be able to respond. So, Giuseppe, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're the first. Kick us off with your 7 minutes of insights, please.
Okay, thank you. I'm really surprised. I've never heard somebody including in his speech Edmund Burke and Napoleon. It was really interesting. Now, before I start, I have to tell you something. Unfortunately, I am an engineer. And when I say unfortunately, it is because, my wife actually say unfortunately. We engineers, we do have problems. We tend to model the things and to find solutions. So we are talking about Europe. So the first question is, what is Europe? Because, somebody will tell you Europe is anything between the Atlantic and the Urals. Somebody will tell you something different, maybe to the Caucasus. Most of us will tell Europe in this context is the European Union. And so the second question is, what is the European Union? Because we tend to imagine that is a single block or a single mind deciding. As you know very well, the European Union has 3 legs. One is the Parliament, the other is the Commission, and the third is the Council. And somebody is missing, actually, because the European Union is us, the people. So if the people has not agreed on something, the politicians will not follow the people. If the politicians have no fixed idea, the Commission will do nothing. This is the stage we are. This is the stage we are. Because as far as the defense industry is concerned, we have been listening about 800 billions for defense, 150 billions on behalf of the Commission and the other 650 on behalf of the governments. Then if we look at the newspapers or the television and we hear what the government says, the situation is, let's say, we'll be polite, is mixed. So the industry, the companies, we do need a clear vision of the future. Otherwise, we cannot do anything. Of course, we need the money. Of course, we need the time. But we need a clear vision of the future. And this is something lacking. We are trying to convince everybody we need this kind of vision, because when my government say you need to double the production of your missiles, I reply, okay, I need money, I need people, I need facilities. And if I have no vision of the future, I am not investing in the people and in the facilities, so we will not get the missiles. But the politicians, they need to have something tomorrow, and tomorrow is not possible for industry. So this is the major point. We need the people of Europe taking care of it and forcing the politicians to take the right decisions. Also because, as I was telling, the Commission is not in charge of defense. The Commission is in charge of industry. And the defense industry, is not living in a market. What is a market? Market is a noisy place where people go to sell eggs and maybe hens. My hens are better than yours. This is not the defense market. The defense market is haute couture. We work for a prince. I'm Italian, I work for the Italian prince. My French colleagues in the MBDA, they work for the French prince. Sometime, but not very, very common, couple of princes get together, but they always at the end tell you, I want a new robe for the ball, and my robe must be better. So this is not the market, and the European Commission should try to understand we are not on the market. Thank you.
Giuseppe, thank you very much for a very clear statement, and also for keeping commendably within the 7 minutes, which probably I didn't in my introduction, so thank you for that. And now I go to Alina Enea, who is from Bucharest. She's currently the lead advisor at the Aspen Institute in Bucharest. Somebody who also worked very closely with Alessandro's successor as the Deputy Secretary General of NATO a few years afterwards, Mircea Genoa. As we're speaking Eastern Europe, having the perspective from the Black Sea from Romania is absolutely indispensable. Alina, the floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, Jamie, let me tell you that not only for officials it's very difficult to live through these times, but also for analysts, trying to figure out what the heck is going on, trying to make a sense of all the news that are coming in, not to mention the fake news that are continuously coming in. So it's not easy for anybody. Especially for me on this panel, trying to talk about Central Europe, which is a very non-homogeneous conglomerate. But however, I'll do my best and I'll try to focus on things which are common, and I'll also try to go through what I think are the three, for me, the way I see it, the three possible, probable and possible scenarios. So the current situation in Central Europe is being shaped by three very important dimensions. The first dimension is internal politics. And as you probably know, because I'm pretty sure you follow, internal politics in all of these countries is extremely turbulent. It's very dynamic, but it's also very turbulent. We have elections coming up in Romania, and everybody knows how well this is going. We have elections coming up in Poland. We also have elections coming up later in the year in Czechia, and then probably again Bulgaria, because they keep having elections. They've been keeping having elections for the last 2 years. And then, very importantly, we have elections coming up in Hungary in next year, 2026. There is a extreme right, nationalistic, sovereignistic, anti-EU, so it's more than EU skeptic, anti-EU surge across the region. You have seen it spectacularly in Romania. You're probably unfortunately going to see it again a month from now. But it's not only Romania. We also have the Fico of the regions, and we have, of course, the Orbans of the region. A breakthrough might be coming in Poland, where we might be getting, they may be getting a leader of a different profile than what I've just explained. To add to all of this political turbulence, we have very heavy Russian interference in everything that is politics and in everything that is economy. And this has been widely documented. I will not necessarily go through it. The second important factor is security. And as everybody is being confused about their strategic realignment, Europe and the rest of the world, so is obviously Central Europe, especially the countries which are bordering or are very close to Ukraine and to the war. We have countries throughout the region who are only, now we can say, only at 2% of their GDP going into defense, with a notable exception of Poland, which is at almost 5 and pledged to be at 5. But this is obviously not enough. And we have countries that are seriously preoccupied to expand their domestic production capabilities, but going from a very low beginning, if you want, very old industrial base, undeveloped industrial base, with the exception of Poland and with the exception of Czechia, who have their national champions. The other countries are not doing that greatly. Very little cooperation when it comes to defense capabilities, joint procurement throughout the region, as it is throughout Europe as well. And economy, of course, where you have, in the region, you have countries which are export-driven, Czechia, Hungary, Poland, Slovakia, which are going to be heavily impacted by the tariffs that Trump has just announced recently. They are integral to the European supply chain, hence they are going to also be affected because Germany is going to be affected. In addition, you will have sector-specific challenges, automotive I mentioned, and also the pharmaceutical industries. How can things evolve? And the three scenarios that I think are, I see them as both possible and probable, because they are not necessarily at the same time. They must be going in sequence. The first one is strategic autonomy. Everything that is going on, everything that is being driven from the US by Trump's policies might lead to a strategic autonomy, not only in Europe, but especially in countries of Central Europe. In economy, you have a moderate downturn, and you might have the EU cushion. In security, you have NATO strained, but you don't have NATO destroyed, and you have defense, EU defense rising. And in internal politics, you have moderate tension, but you have an EU-friendly push. The second scenario is fragmentation, where you have a sharp downturn in economy and you have protectionism. NATO falters and you have chaos everywhere. And then within the countries, you have populism and authoritarianism. And the third scenario, which is realignment, you have, economically speaking, or in the economy, you have the countries of Central Europe moving towards markets other than the US because of the US tariffs, obviously Asia, countries in Asia. You have NATO restructured and you have regional pacts. And in domestic politics, you have polarization, but you have new political forces, young, youth-driven, EU-friendly political forces. Why I'm saying that these scenarios are both possible and probable is because I see them in sequence. I see a push for strategic economy. I also see it being followed by fragmentation because of the impact on the economic scene, and also because of the impact of EU's inability, and here I am in the same line of thought probably with Giuseppe, inability to really address all of these issues. But then I finally see realignment, and this realignment might be ended with the 2026 Hungarian elections, where TISA party and Orban's competition has a good chance of winning, is likely to win, as the opinion polls show. And in the 10 seconds that I still have, what is very important to notice, and this is specific for periods of very, very high crisis, is that the external drivers are more important than the internal drivers, at least in countries of Central Europe. Whatever these countries do internally and domestically, and however good these governments could be, or would be, although they are not, the external drivers are the ones who will dictate the path that the countries will take.
Okay, Alina, thank you very much indeed. I welcomed everybody in the room. I forgot, of course, to welcome the people who are following us on live streaming. So if you can hear me, see me hopefully as well, and the panel, a warm welcome and thanks for joining us today as well. So we now go to Thibaut Muserg, who is an associate researcher here in Rome with the International Relations Institute, very well known, but you've spent a lot of time looking at American politics, and of course that's always the elephant in the room, right? The US, can we still rely upon it? Will it still be engaged? You know, how do we try to keep the Americans engaged? Not easy at the moment, particularly with the economic issues and the security issues increasingly impacting on each other. So Thibaut, thanks very much again for joining us today. You're going to give us a sort of political overview. So away you go in 7 minutes.
Thank you. And yeah, there's a lot to unpack. So let's start with the United States and what the hell is going on in American politics, because you can hear several messages being uttered by different politicians, sometimes on the same day, and at the same time you're looking at your shares on the stock market, you might easily be forgiven for freaking out. Don't look at them right now, it's not looking good. Can anybody hear me? Apparently there's some issues with the mic.
There's something wrong with your mic.
Yeah, there's some unfortunately some echo on the microphone.
I think there's
fire a second. You've got instead a.
That's okay. I think can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, a lot of things are happening right now at the same time. Several messages, sometimes coming up, not necessarily coming together very nicely, and at the same time, if you're looking at your shares on the stock market, you might be forgiven for freaking out. When we're talking about whether the US are still going to be engaged in Europe, I think the answer is yes, because there is so much interactions between the American companies and the European market that is just impossible for the United States to pull out, except at a huge cost for the American economy. And I understand that there are a lot of irrational things that are happening right now, but that would be complete irrationality. That doesn't mean necessarily that everybody inside the Trump administration wants to stay in NATO. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is a big love for NATO in all of the administration, but I think Secretary of State Rubio has been very clear this past weekend to the Europeans that at least he wanted America to stay in NATO, and I cannot imagine him saying that without having the approval of the big boss, particularly right now. Now, the problem that we have with the U.S. administration is that we're not exactly talking the same language, Europeans and Americans. You remember the famous Bob Kagan book, Europeans are from Venus, Americans are from Mars. This is still roughly the case, and I think there's a lot of misunderstanding right now in the transatlantic relationship. Misunderstandings that are slowly but surely being taken behind us, but it's this, the old misunderstandings are being replaced by new misunderstandings. Let me explain. The old misunderstanding was that America was going to be there, whatever the weather, everything was going to be okay, and Europeans in the end didn't have to take care too much of their defense because war was far away, and they were basically being asked to take part in peace and other missions far, far away, and everything was okay. That was the early 2000s. Obviously now war is much, much, much closer to Europe. It's actually in Europe. I wrote a book in 2021 which was called War in Europe with a question mark, and just a year later there was no need for the question mark anymore. So the game has changed, but the Europeans have had a lot of difficulties adapting to that. And I'm a Frenchman. Right now, if I want to put money into defense, that means that with considering the growth numbers that France has, if I want to take money to pay for defense, that means I have to take it away from something else. Now, the target that we have right now is international aid. Nobody is going to cry over it, and that's totally fine. But that's not going to be enough to get to 3%, 4%, 5%, which, by the way, was the standard NATO defense spending during the Cold War. So it's not something that is being asked that is absolutely a crazy number. The question here is a question of growth. How can we get back? How can the Europeans get back to growth? So that's the first misunderstanding between the Europeans and the Americans. The Americans are saying you need to spend more, and the Europeans have been very, very slow to answer that, including when a European country was invaded by Russia. I do remember President Macron saying that we needed to get into a war economy. That was in 2022. We're in 2025, and we're not, and France at least is not spending much more on its defense than it did 2 years ago. Russia, though, is spending much, much more. So here's again a misunderstanding. Now there's a misunderstanding now on the American part, because for the Americans, Europeans spending more money on their defense means Europeans spending more money on the American industrial complex. And this is where there is a fundamental misunderstanding that needs to be broken. That does not necessarily mean that Europeans need to stop buying American, but that there needs to be a European defense industry that needs to emerge. How does that emerge? We've heard some interesting words just now, but I think, and there is a debate right now that is ongoing whether it should be fully European or European Union, or whether it needs to include the Brits, the Norwegians, the Ukrainians. I tend, even though I'm a Frenchman, I will surprise everybody by going for the second solution and having an industry that is taking on board the Brits, the Norwegians, and the Ukrainians. I also think that we need to think about what we need. Right now there is an emergency to rearm and to rearm very quickly. We need to be very clear on what the immediate menace is for everybody. That includes Italy, France, Spain, and that is Russia. That's number one. And number two, what we need to counter this threat. Do we need F-35s or do we need to invest more in drones? If we need F-35s, then we need to invest in the American defense industry, which I understand a lot of people are going to have issues with at a time in which we're at a commercial war with the United States or something looking like it. But if we want some drones, then if we want some drones, then probably the most capable allies that we have are the Ukrainians, because the Ukrainians are making loads of them for a very low price, and we need to integrate Ukraine into our defense structure and our defense strategy. And I will leave it here.
Thibault, thanks, and thanks to all speakers for being incredibly disciplined when it comes to the 7 minutes, which gives us more time for discussion. Thibault, thank you very much. You put some interesting questions about the balance between EU investment and investment in the United States and the priorities that Europe should look for in terms of new technology versus more sort of standard equipment. Maybe when we get to the Q&A, Giuseppe will respond there. But in the meantime, I'd like to thank for her patience, Oksana. I can see you, Oksana, on the screen. Hopefully you can see and hear us here. You're nodding. That's a good sign. So thank you for being patient on the screen, waiting for your turn. But your turn has come. And of course, in a week where European defense ministers are meeting on the Ukrainian peacekeeping force or reassurance force, where Ukrainians are going to Washington and negotiate on a minerals deal with the Trump administration. A lot is happening. So do you feel that at least you're getting the support that you need? What more needs to be done, and what's your assessment of how Ukraine could continue the process of Euro-Atlantic integration, even in these terribly difficult circumstances? You're the advisor to the Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration in Kiev, so you are obviously the best person to answer these questions. So the floor is yours, and we look forward to what you have to tell us. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much, and greetings from Kyiv. I hope there will be no interruption for air alert or whatsoever, but honestly saying, and given the topic of the discussion more focused on reconstruction, as already the colleagues on the panel mentioned, it's very hard to follow now what is really going on, and specifically it's also hard for us to talk about the reconstruction whereas Russia actually continues deconstruction of Ukraine, and during the ceasefire talks, which are now ongoing, actually the level of attacks by missiles and drones, Iranian type drones, Shaheds, actually increased and intensified during the last weeks about 50%. So we had quite a hard weekend, specifically in Kryvyi Rih. On Friday, Russia hit the playground for children, actually killing 9 children with 1 missile, Iskander, which was also equipped with the cluster munition. So you see now the construction is going on very actively, unfortunately. And this is the usual tactics of intimidation. We do understand that. And also kind of scaring off Ukrainians partners and Ukrainians, both Europeans and the United States, in terms of supporting our European and Euro-Atlantic integration as a part of our sovereignty and as a part of the Ukrainians' sovereign choice to join the alliances that they want. And we've been discussing, and I heard several interesting ideas in the panel, and so for us, the European and Euro-Atlantic integration, so integration both to NATO and the European Union, is actually 2 wings of the same bird. For us, it's basically moving to Europe. And in that regard, I would probably refer back to one of the speakers' points. So what is Europe? So we tend to define Europe not geographically, rather, but the community of the same values. And for us, rejoining this community of the same values, which are the liberal values, the democracy and democratic values, freedoms of speech, of beliefs, of culture, and freedoms of market, is one of the top decisions of the Ukrainian people, which were expressed, and actually, despite all the hardships, the level of public support towards EU integration and towards NATO integration remains extremely high. With regard to NATO, actually, it's still, the situation is not very much black and white in terms of perceptions. So we hear a lot of messages with regard that NATO would be the no solution for the near time, at least because of the Russia clear red line, etc., etc. But for Ukrainian people, I think in terms of military support, probably NATO is now seen a little bit differently. The general narrative is that NATO proved to be very indecisive, very slow, and NATO hasn't provided little support for Ukraine. So all the little support was provided by bilaterally or through this multinational new formats like Ramstein Group or others. And but with regard to that, NATO is seen as rather a political construct for the stable, just, and long-standing peace for future. So, and for us, it's the part of the package for the possibility of the just and long-standing peace. Contrary, the EU now is seen by people as a very reliable and very actually active partner. So I just want to remind that back in February 2022, when we had these first hours of large-scale invasion, actually the actual weapons deliveries from the European Union started within 48 hours. And that was extremely prompt reaction, which actually fascinated some of the Ukrainians because we probably expected that more from NATO than from the EU, but this is what it is. And in general, EU also established a very effective military mission, so we are thankful for 73,000 Ukrainian military being trained through the EU MAM. And with regard to the practical support, so we are talking here about 143 billion euros for general assistance, out of which more than 50 billion are the military assistance. Ukraine is very much interested to be the part of the, generally saying, European defense industry and the European defense architecture. So we are following with a great interest all the projects which are now being announced and all the initiatives, including Rearm Ukraine and the initiative of Kaya Kalas. So we are in touch with our European partners and we are ready to contribute. So it's not only one-way process where we expect the assistance coming in, and getting nothing back to the European Union. On the contrary, we would be happy to share the first lessons learned from the ongoing war and combat actions, and indeed to help to shape this vision, what is needed under the new modern conditions of war. And second of all, so our armed forces being, trained and tested by the real actions and by the real war with the Russian Federation could also contribute to this wider security architecture. And the last point, not to exceed the 7 minutes time.
Thank you, Oksana.
Go
ahead,
so,
please.
just last point on the complex threats that the European Union is facing. Is absolutely correct that no defense planning, no acquisition of defense industry, and no money relocation can be possible without people. Opinion, but we need to be very cautious who is actually shaping this public opinion that you mentioned and people's will. And in that regard, we see that increase of Russian hybrid action and influences interference into social media, into the political parties' finance. So I think without this very prudent and very active actions on different fronts, not only on the military industry development, but also on defending the democratic values and principles in social life, the success will not be reached.
Thank you, Oksana. Thank you very much indeed. And stay there, please, because we'll have hopefully some time for questions and discussion. I would say in defense of my old organization, NATO, that it doesn't have weapons of its own. So, of course, they would always be transferred to Ukraine on a bilateral basis. But, of course, NATO has taken over the coordination of that and the training at the Wiesbaden Center. But that's not a debate we need to get into now. But thank you again for very clear messages. Just a quick follow-up, as audience, please prepare your questions. Giuseppe, would you like quickly, and I know you're very succinct, so to respond to some of those questions that were raised
Sure.
about defense production by Thibault?
Actually, in Europe, one of the problem we have is that the attitude of the different countries toward the inclusion of other countries within the European defense industry scheme and framework is different. So France does have a very special relation with the United Kingdom, the Lancaster House Treaty. So France is wishing of having the UK with a special agreement joining the defense compound in Europe. And Italy, for example, we say European means based in Europe with the technologies and money remaining in Europe, notwithstanding the controlling entity. So if Fiat, former Fiat Avio or Avio GE in Italy, they produce airplane engines. They are controlled by the Americans, but for us it's okay, it's fine.
Because
they can get access to European funding. This is not the position of the French. The British are okay, but not US-owned company. And then on the other side, we have other countries such as Poland or even Germany. They say, I need my stuff tomorrow. There is no way to get this stuff from the European industry, so I'll buy American. So we have different position. My position is there is no European defense industry without the UK. This is impossible. We can consider at least Norway as a specific important partner, and this is the reality. So let's find a solution, because if we don't find a solution, there will be no safe industrial production of military equipment in Europe.
Yeah.
So this is the point.
So defining the participants first and then moving ahead. Very clear message. Alina, I wanted to ask you after what you said, again, just a brief comment. Are you in Romania more worried about the sort of classical military threats, Russia, ships in the Black Sea, the spillover of the war in Ukraine, or you seem to be very worried from what you said at the end about sort of the hybrid situation, the internal resilience factors and the ability of government society to deal with those resilience issues? I mean, how much progress has Romania made here?
We are worried about both because both have very obviously destabilizing potential, as events have proven in Romania lately. But also the military is extremely important for us, and we are worried not as much about land, defense or land attacks, but we are very worried about what happens or might happen in the Black Sea. We have drills going on, drill baby drill. We have drills going on in the Black Sea, or very soon we'll have, that need to be protected, and the protection of those areas is of extreme importance to us. The Black Sea is as you very well know, under the A2AD of Russia, so that is of concern to Romania. And there is no easy solution because of the straits, which are being controlled by Turkey, and NATO ships not being able to come into the Black Sea. So that's of extreme importance to Romania. But I don't think we should put the hybrid warfare and the methods that Russia is using when it comes to its interference. I don't think we should not look at them extremely carefully and extremely seriously, because, as I said, and as it was proved, they have very high destabilizing factor. Not only because they can change the course of elections, but also because the Russian narrative is so well being rolled on social media that it really reaches a lot of people, and that it really brainwashes a lot of people, and not only Romania, throughout Europe and throughout Central Europe, especially, I would say.
Thank you very much. And Thibaut, very quick question from me to you. You mentioned, of course, what the Europeans are now doing to respond to the current context. Are they doing enough? Are they spending enough? Are you satisfied with the degree of the kind of European response, or do you still think it's below the level of the challenge?
Well, it's obviously below the level of the challenge. And we've been very, very slow to act. But once again, as I said at the very beginning, when you're Italy, when you're France, when you're Poland, it's less of a problem because Poland grows at a very fast pace right now. So it is relatively easy to save some more money to get into the defense. For France, Italy, which have had for many years very low growth, it's increasingly a problem because there is also a social cost to pay. And we were just talking about hybrid warfare. Guess who is trying to use the social problems that we have in our countries by selling fake news and candidates? It's the Russians, right? So there is a balance to be taken with also this understanding, this very different understanding of the threat. And I think this is something that we're not working on enough, whether it's the think tanks, the media or the politicians, this idea, this common perception of threat. Yeah. That, for example, in Italy, I know Italy has a long tradition of pacifism, but Italy is also concerned by the Russian threat. And I'm sorry to say it very directly, but if you guys wake up tomorrow, and this is not, by the way, this is not fiction that we're talking about. We're talking about the developments that are arriving right now in Libya. If you wake up tomorrow with a Russian base, with a Russian naval base in Libya, which is right now being thought of, discussed, probably built, it's going to be a very different relationship with Russia you're going to have. Yeah. As Italians, right? So I think this is something that we need to really to work on, a common perception of the threats and how we react to it, because there's also disunity, including in Central Europe, with people saying that, oh, the Russians are too strong, we need to find an accommodation with them, which is what not only, I mean, people obviously will say, oh, Viktor Orban, but it's not only Viktor Orban. This is something that is actually shared in some candidates in Romania, some candidates in Slovakia are saying, oh, and this perception, which is coming more from the Baltic, that there is a threat that needs to be confronted.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you, of course, for reminding us that the Russian challenge, as it were, is not just in Eastern Europe, where we seem to talk about it all the time. It has it's all around Europe, right, and beyond as well. And we need to keep that perspective in mind too. Thank you. And then, Oksana, just a quick question to you, and then audience, it will be your turn, I promise. You're obviously a candidate for EU membership. How much of the actual negotiations with Brussels are you able to conduct in this wartime situation? Is everything going to have to wait for the end of the conflict before really moving ahead? Or are, in terms of the EU chapters and the alignment, the legal norms, the standards, are you able to sort of get on with a lot of this even in today's difficult circumstances? I think that would be interesting for us to know.
Thank you so much, Jamie. So first of all, absolutely, we are in the process of discussions with the European Union. Our ambition is to have 3 clusters negotiation opened. So we passed through the screening, bilateral screening with the European Commission in these 3 clusters. And it's actually not exactly the war which is preventing us to open the negotiations. The formal negotiations is one of the Eastern European countries of the European Union. And we hope 2 ministers of foreign affairs, Minister Siriatro and Minister Sibiga, met in Brussels last week. So we hear some positive signals, and we work actually today also one of the meetings we held how to move this process ahead. So we developed the roadmaps for reforms to open the first cluster on fundamentals, which is, I think, the basis. We quite in the progress for the security and defense policy and the foreign policy cluster, and also one on the free markets. So this process is ongoing. And if you ask about the expectations, I think from the European Union, in Ukraine is, first of all, I think that we expect unity inside of the EU, because unity is actually the very powerful weapon that the European Union has. And I think that attempts of Russia to disrupt this unity is actually the signal that Russia considers to be very, strong weapons against Russians, imperialistic and kind of Soviet ghost mentality. And we also expect that more courage in the political decisions in terms of that Russia should pay, actually must pay for what is done. And specifically, I'm talking here about the frozen assets of the Russian Federation.
Yeah.
Those decisions can actually contribute exactly to the development of the EU defense industry and to be this basis for the future defense and security architecture.
Thanks, Oksana. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we still have a few minutes left. So please, anybody with their hands up who wants to come in, it's a bit dark at the back of the room because of the lighting situation, so please gesticulate furiously with your hands so that I could see you. We've got time for a couple of questions. Be grateful if you could also identify yourselves. Sir, please go ahead, and also make it clear to whom on the panel you wish to put your question. So, we need a bit more sound there. No, it's not. We need more sound. That is
okay. Excellent.
Exactly what we need.
My name is Jakub Brzeźniewski. I'm an independent analyst, and this is for the panel as a whole. You brought up the F-35 program as well as the reorientation, regionalization of NATO procurement, the development of a European defense industry. And the F-35 program, apart from the airframe it delivered, was also meant as a new paradigm for NATO-wide acquisition and development. It is only now fully coming online with the delivery of the last series of airplanes to Norway, and it had some serious problems through its development process with cost overruns and significant delays.
Yep.
Is there anything from that process, as the Americans announced the F-47, sixth generation fighter,
Yep.
Is there anything from that process that can be developed or salvaged? Is there an appetite for joining the F-47 development in the same manner as the F-35?
Gotcha. Okay, we got the question. Forgive me, but it's just that the time is a very rigorous dictator always. But thank you for that. I think obviously that's a question for Giuseppe. Let's take maybe two more, and then we really will have to wrap up. So where do I see a microphone, please? Yes, please, at the back.
Yes, I'm here.
Ah, you're here. Sorry, there was somebody got up at the back. You're there. Thank you.
My name is Carlo Trezza. I'm a member of the executive board of the foundation. My question goes to Mr. Cossiga, who mentioned the fact that there can be basically no meaningful European industry without the United Kingdom, and yet the UK has been outside of the European Union for almost 10 years. So in what kind of framework do you think that this cooperation can be established?
That's a very good question. Thank you very much for that. So all the questions so far to Giuseppe. Giuseppe, before you take the floor, just an opportunity for any third and final person. That's all we're going to have time for, unfortunately, to come in. Last chance. I feel as if I'm the auctioneer at Sotheby's, giving you the final chance to lose a fortune on a piece of art. No? Nobody else? Okay, so Giuseppe,
thank you.
The floor is yours.
The first question. The F-35 has been an operational choice for many air force in Europe, not an industrial choice. The F-35 has no effect, is of no interest for the European industry. So this is the point. We have lost an opportunity. We are buying American, and as usual, we lost an opportunity. And then for the next generation, for the sixth generation system, we are responding in a very European way. There are two of them. The FCAS of SCAF, the French and German one, or the maybe French and German one. It has been postponed to maybe 2040. And then there is a rather unusual British, Italian, and Japanese one. It's nonsense from the industrial point of view, of course. It's nonsense for Europe. I'm afraid the American will win again. So either we European find within Europe or a solution, or the American will always win. This is the point. And the third one, okay, we need the British industry. So the only way, the most reasonable way, is to make a special agreement for the defense industry and for defense between the European Union and the United Kingdom. This is the only way. I'm talking about a special case for the UK, because as you can understand, if we say a special agreement with NATO, so NATO is the United States, it's not going to work for as far as industry is concerned. NATO is Norway, that could be fine. They are rather a US control industry, but it's fine. And then we have Turkey. And this, as you know, in the European Union is still a problem, because the Greek will never allow the Turkish industry to be allowed to obtain financing from Europe. So this is Europe. This is the Europe we have for the time being, but we really need the UK.
Yep, and Keir Starmer's going to Brussels for a summit with the EU in May, so fingers crossed, Giuseppe, fingers crossed. Obviously, I'm giving away my passport when I say that. Thibaut, one sentence on that then, please, because we have to wrap up. And Alina, a sentence as well.
Is this working? Yes. On the F-35, I think we need to be very clear that politically, probably on the defense, on the side of the generals, this is still working. But politically, something fundamental has been broken over the past 2 months, and that is trust. Okay? And you can do whatever you want over the next couple of years at least. It's going to take a long, long time to repair the transatlantic relationship. So on the side of the, who takes the contracts and who doesn't, I think this is clearly, if you are in the business of European defense, this is clearly an opportunity, and I think it's the European defense right now is the only European stock market that's not crashing. That's for a reason.
Not at all.
but I mean, this is something that we need to understand, that inside the relationship there is something broken. This is trust, and that's going to take a long, long time to repair.
Yeah, it takes a long time and easily damaged. One sentence then, please, Alina, from you.
Yes, I want to pick up on this issue of having UK included in the EU defense industry, or part of the package. I think we are beyond that question. From everything that is going on, looking at the rearm readiness 2030 paper that came out, the things are, as I said, beyond the question. The problem is, how do we help them fund this? How do we include them in the funding package, in the 800 billions, or probably even beyond? And now we are looking. The Commission is looking at solutions to this problem, to the extent that there are talks about the Northern Defense Fund that Poland, UK, Sweden, Finland, and Norway, because Norway also needs to be included, there are talks about this Northern Defense Fund. So I think we are beyond asking the question. We are looking into how do we make it happen.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much to my panel. What we've heard is that there are different scenarios in Eastern Europe still, which is frustrating, but good scenarios and not only bad scenarios. Of course, how do we swing the cursor towards the good and away from the bad? We learn that economic security and military security are increasingly intertwined, so we need to manage both. Europe is responding, but the question is it enough given the pace of events? How to keep the US engaged and convince the United States of the merits of that engagement, but to make the transition to a greater European defense role more cooperative. Time, money, and American encouragement. We heard about Ukraine and what it needs, but good news that it's still able to progress its membership application with the Commission even in these difficult times. But we heard from Oksana that we need to be united, we need to have courage, and we need a comprehensive strategy for dealing with Russia. So those are my takeaways. Again, thank you so much to the panel. I think Oksana had to leave us in the meantime, so my thanks to her through the virtual space. Thanks to the three panelists in the audience. Hopefully we've got the conference off to a good start. I'm now going to invite our panelists to exit the stage gracefully to applause, rapturous applause please, from all of you. And in the meantime, I would like to ask our next speaker, a special intervention from Teresa Czerwinska, Vice President of the European Investment Bank. Madam, you've heard a lot while you've joined us about financing and investment and the private sector, venture capital. The EIB has always been in the spotlight, of course, in a lot of these discussions. Can it loosen its criteria? Can it go beyond dual capability financing? What message did it send to the other banking sector about the prospects of putting more money into defense programs? You may want to talk about other things as well, but I know they'll be interested in those topics. I will exit the stage, but I'd like on behalf of the NATO Foundation today to thank you very much for coming from Luxembourg and for joining us here today. We very much look forward to your intervention. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen. It's great pleasure to be here today in Rome as Vice President of the European Investment Bank responsible for operations in Ukraine. It's again important discussion personally for me, and also topics you've touched upon today. So it's my pleasure to make introductory remarks to the panel on Ukraine's reconstruction, the reconstruction challenge. As it has been mentioned, European Investment Bank is very well known to this very audience. We are a financial arm of the European Union, and we are providing financing to projects and programs in order to achieve public policy goals. So we are a very special animal. We are bank, we are a financial institution, but at the same time, we are driven by the policy goals. We are owned by 27 member states, and their political guidelines are guided us in our daily business. As you also know, EIB, as the EU bank, stands by Ukraine since day one of Russian full-scale invasion. And we decided to disburse very quickly to Ukraine almost 2 weeks after the full-scale invasion, more than 2 billion euros. We decided also to address Ukraine's most urgent needs, making our procedures more flexible, and also by repurposing also some loans in our portfolio, which we have been collected before the war started. Just to remind you that EIB is a significant investor in Ukraine. Before the war, we collected a portfolio of amounting of 7.5 billion euros in public and private sectors, and our portfolio has been very well diversified. We are investing in energy, transport, but also in social infrastructure. 1/3 of our portfolio in Ukraine is dedicated to private sector. But just to underline between the difference between public and private, we put more attention to invest in public infrastructure. Today, I'm really happy that you are going to discuss the reconstruction challenge, and I wanted to share with you perhaps a couple of remarks just before the discussion, and also how do we in the European Investment Bank, how do we see the reconstruction challenges in Ukraine? So first of all, we are investing in Ukraine. We haven't stopped our activity during the war, so we are active during the war, and we recognize the rebuilding of Ukraine as not just a task for us, it's a mission. So, and this mission presents, of course, several challenges. The first challenge we are facing, and this is extremely huge and important for us as a financial institution. We must rebuild Ukraine's critical infrastructure. Roads, water system, energy grids are essential for the country's recovery and growth and demand substantial investments. Critical infrastructure is important and indeed critical for social purposes because of quality of life and doing business, but also critical infrastructure is very important for potential investors because they look for doing business for certain standard of infrastructure. The updated joint rapid damage and needs assessment shows that the total cost of reconstruction and recovery in Ukraine will reach more than 500 billion euros over the next decade. Second, we also put a lot of attention to empower Ukraine's businesses, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises. These businesses are the backbone of the economy, and they need significant support that is flexible, accessible, and tailored to local needs, including financing in local currency. And finally, we must align Ukraine's reconstruction efforts with the country's political and economic aspirations. Every project we finance must bring Ukraine closer to European standards, reinforcing governance, transparency, and economic reforms. Let me underline that talking about financing, the very important part of the financing is also project preparation, because the better we prepare the projects, the implementation will be quicker and much smoother. So for that reason, we dedicated from bank-owned resources 100 million euros for technical assistance and advisory to support Ukrainian authorities in the preparation of the bankable projects. We are investing in the preparation of energy projects. We are investing in the preparation of projects in transport and social infrastructure. Two sectors particularly important for our activity. The first one is energy, and when Ukraine's energy infrastructure was attacked, we launched the 600 million euros Ukraine Energy Rescue Plan, and this initiative kept homes warm and lights on through the winter and protected infrastructure from drones and debris. Through our energy rescue plan, we helped repair damaged critical infrastructure and ensured the uninterrupted delivery of essential services across the country. And we are committed to enhance energy resilience by supporting Ukraine in district heating, production, and distribution, as well as renewable energy, to ensuring a stable energy supply. We also co-financed shelters for critical energy infrastructure in Ukraine with our partner IFIs like EBRD and KfW. And the second transport we put particular attention to is the transport sector, because it tightens the link which Ukraine has to the European Union. So we are co-investing, starting with export routes, railway, border crossing points, and connectivity with the single market. We see particular importance of the transport infrastructure because first, as I mentioned, it tightens the links, economic links to the European Union through the export routes. And second, we are co-investing in solidarity lanes between Ukraine, Moldova, and the European Union, which also allows a movement not only for goods but also for people. Only last year, efforts to modernize infrastructure and reduce reliance on Russia have led to tangible benefits for Ukraine, namely new accessible public transport. Buses and trams are enhancing public transport in 6 cities. And secondly, we are co-financing Kyiv in replacing Russian-made metro coaches. Finally, I also wanted to draw your attention to the support to small and medium enterprises because by supporting small and medium enterprises, we are strengthening Ukraine's economic resilience as a backbone of recovery and growth. So we have unlocked substantial financing for SMEs, including in local currency by partnering with local banks to improve conditions for Ukrainian entrepreneurs. And our guarantees help banks reduce collateral for SMEs, keeping them afloat and preserving jobs. We also know that to support Ukrainian small and medium enterprises and build the resilience of Ukrainian economy, it means also that we need to support also EU small and medium SME sector. And for this very reason, we have developed new instruments to aid EU businesses in delivering value to Ukraine. We are supporting EU-based SMEs exporting to Ukraine with the 300 million euros Ukraine Export Credit Facility for export credit agencies. By fostering trade and economic exchanges, we can provide indirect yet vital support to Ukraine's recovery, and this approach not only strengthens economic ties but also contributes to the nation's overall stability and growth. We also provide direct support to SMEs via the banking sector thanks to the EU guarantees. We signed, 3 weeks ago, we signed with the European Commission 2 billion euros package of guarantees exclusively for the European Investment Bank, which will be dedicated to finance and co-finance projects in SME and public sector in Ukraine. And finally, we also launched the EU for Ukraine Fund dedicated to bridge financing targets SMEs by providing better access to finance. The total size of the fund is almost 500 million euros. So all in all, we support both sides. We support European SMEs exporting to Ukraine, and also we support Ukrainian SMEs to do business, to allow them to do business during the war. So those three things: first, support of critical infrastructure; second, support for SMEs; and finally, support Ukrainian partners to bringing EU standards to the sector in Ukraine. I also wanted to underline that the importance of our solidarity and cooperation among nations, which has never been more critical. And I very much agree with the speaker from the previous panels who said that unity is the most important or very significant weapon we have together in the European Union. So let me conclude with this very, very comment that unity is very significant, very important weapon we are having. And also reassure you that European Investment Bank stands ready to support Ukraine as long as it takes. Thank you.
Working? It's okay. Good afternoon, anyone. Please, I would like to ask the panelists to join me. My name is Frediano Finucci. I'm an Italian journalist. Nobody's perfect. I'm the chief of the business and foreign desk of the Italian TV, of the Italian broadcaster La Sette, and I would like to thank Ambassador Alessandro Minuto-Rizzo and the NATO Foundation for inviting me to chair this very interesting panel. Would you
Member of Parliament.
please join me? I think
Thank you. Thank you for your
we are missing our MP. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Please.
Nice to meet you. Hello.
So here we are. Welcome. Welcome to the second panel of this afternoon. As you know very well, Italy this July will host the 4th edition of the conference on the reconstruction in Ukraine. The previous editions were hosted by Switzerland, the UK and Germany, and we had also a few bilateral events in Rome and Milan, and also an online forum, if I'm not wrong, in October 2023. So when it comes to the reconstruction of Ukraine, dear friends, dear distinguished guests, we have to be very, very clear. There are crucial questions that need to be addressed and need to be addressed in advance. The first one is, do we need to wait until the end of the conflict to start rebuilding the country? Or maybe we can start reconstruction even under Russian shelling. We heard the lady connected from Kiev, what's going on. The second question is maybe one of the crucial one: who will pay for the reconstruction? Is there a connection between the countries that will have the so-called boots on the ground to ensure the security, and the companies that will take part in the reconstruction, mainly the American ones? The third question is, how can we ensure that the money flowing into Ukraine, we heard 500 billions in a decade, will be spent properly? And here we have our friends from Deloitte that I think will go into that. Last but not least, should we rebuild things in Ukraine as they were before, or maybe this is a good opportunity, an extraordinary opportunity to rethink and modernize the country? And then, is there a link, and maybe this is the toughest question I will address to our MP, is there a link between reconstruction and accountability? In other words, justice vis-à-vis what Russia did the 22nd of February of 3 years ago. So I would like to start with Enrico Petrocelli. I remind that the rules of engagement are the same, so 7 minutes for each, and then I will make you a question, and then I will answer, I will open the floor for a Q&A session. Enrico Petrocelli is the head of international institutional relations of Cassa Depositi e Prestiti, we call CDP, which is the Italy National Development Bank, is mainly owned by the government and focus on supporting infrastructure projects in Italy, and also small and medium enterprises as well. So you have the floor for 7 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And first of all, let me thank you, NATO Defense, NATO Foundation Defense College, for this opportunity to gather such a high-level bunch of representatives and stakeholders discussing these key issues. And I'm very glad also to join this session about reconstruction challenge in Ukraine. Let me start by underlining a kind of a disclaimer. We are financial institutions. We used to say that we are a policy taker and not policy maker, and in order to have a meaningful discussion on reconstruction in Ukraine, I'm saying the obvious, some political preconditions needs to be there. So obviously the geopolitical landscape and the military conflict ongoing are hugely impacting the discussion around reconstruction. So obviously we'll see how things will develop in coming weeks and months, and how we will be able to bring our specific contribution to the reconstruction in an effective way. But despite this obviously key strategic discussion on the ongoing military conflict and the political and diplomatic efforts to build a just solution to the conflict, I would start by recalling some of the huge efforts that have been already put in place by the international community, the European Union, first of all, in order to support the resilience of the Ukraine society, and already start working for the reconstruction of the country. I very much want to thank also EIB Vice President Czerwinska for what she said. I just want to mention some additional elements to provide the full picture of what has been already done. I think huge efforts have been made by European Union institutions and EU member states that provide already almost 140 billion euros for economic and military assistance to Ukraine, setting up a variety of tools, platforms, the Ukraine donor platforms, which also relying on the extraordinary revenue acceleration loans initiatives, aims to mobilize more than 45 billion euros, setting up also project preparation facility as mentioned by Vice President Czerwinska, the Ukraine facility which is aiming at mobilizing 50 billion euros with a goal to have already deployed by the end of this year almost 30 billion euros. So we have, and within these initiatives and frameworks and facility, we have also specific initiatives, the Ukraine investment framework to mobilize guarantees and grants up to almost 10 billion euros with a leveraging effect that is obviously projecting to mobilize public and private capitals for 40 billion euros. So just to say that all of this is already in place, ongoing. I think it's a huge effort by the European Union. So what we can do more, also from our perspective as financial institutions, very quickly, we know that despite all these efforts, the public fiscal space for all of us is very limited. So there is obviously huge need to create incentives and encouragement private capital to mobilize and to combine and complement public efforts in this regard. So here we are we think well positioned as financial institutions to play this bridging role between public and private sector. So building on top of what I already mentioned, the public efforts from European Union, EU member states and other international partners, we do think ourselves well positioned to provide further support through loans, investments, guarantees to create the minimum condition for private sector to step in and to boost investments and engagement in this context. What we have done so far, we worked on a double track. First, immediate reply. I'm just mentioning a couple of specific initiatives CDP has been already supporting in partnership with World Bank, mobilizing a package of 200 million euros for budget support, supporting the education sector in Ukraine, and a package of 200 million euros in cooperation with EBRD to support energy sector and specific restoring hydroelectric capacity in the country. These are just even small initiatives that obviously are much smaller compared to the one EIB is leading or EBRD is putting forward alone, but I think are meaningful way to show concrete support, solidarity to Ukraine in the short term. In the long term, so the second track, we are trying to build a partnership to mobilize in a coordinated manner the full range of financial institutions, national development banks, multilateral development banks, together with the private sector. We set up together with the EBRD and all G7 financial institutions, the Ukraine investment platform, a co-investment platform to support reconstruction and specifically targeting support to SMEs and private sector in the country. And we are very much also supporting through our business matching platform, B2B, involving already more than 200 companies from Italy and Ukraine to provide concrete encouragement for the private sector to really step in. All these require obviously some additional preconditions. We can mobilize our own resources on top, I'm concluding, on top of the public sector but we need further political commitment of public authorities that should provide further public guarantees to allow us to play catalytic role, so to deploy our funding and supporting, accompanying private companies in coming back to invest and to support reconstruction in the country.
Quite sharp, quite sharp. Thank you, Mr. Petrocelli, for your remarks. I apologize for my pronunciation. Mrs. Halina Yanchenko is a member of the Ukrainian Parliament. She is a secretary of the National Investment Council of Ukraine. So you have the floor for 7 minutes, madam.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Many thanks for the organizers to have this event, first of all, and to have an opportunity to actually express some of the thoughts and some of the opportunities that we can actually develop 3 months in advance before the URC, Ukraine Recovery Conference. And many thanks for the great moderation and great questions put on the floor. So, is there a room for investment, and what can be the reconstruction model of Ukraine? And should we even think about reconstruction? Well, from my experience, and I'm a member of parliament for 5.5 years, I'm deeply involved in parliamentary diplomacy over the past 3 years. And based on my experience, I believe that it's better to actually start all kinds of communication and planning in advance. What we've seen that we can really trust our European partners, but usually because of well-known European bureaucracy, which was uncovered by Mario Draghi's recent report published last September, it really takes time for European partners to consider, think, challenge, and then in the end agree and start acting. We experience it in Ukraine when we were negotiating the military assistance when the full-scale invasion has started, and it was shock for all of us, and that's why we consider that reconstruction negotiations and reconstruction planning should also start in advance to make sure that we find common ground, that we come up with some financial institutions or other types of basically ground to cooperate and make sure that we can all participate in it, and I mean both the government agencies but private sector as well. In the parliament, my main topic was investment related things, economic development, and that's why I'm deeply advocating for private sector to take active participation in recovery. But we also see that things have changed just over the past 2 or 3 months, and we should basically maybe reconsider a little bit what we should focus on when we are talking about reconstruction, but also investment in Ukrainian economics, in European economics, but also in Ukrainian and economic security as well. Given the geopolitical turbulence, but also specific, let's call it uncertainty, that was put on the table by the newly elected American president, and also all these challenges that European high-rank officials have faced in Brussels, but also in capital cities around the countries of that are members of European Parliament. I believe that maybe this reconstruction as well as Euro integration of Ukraine should actually have slightly different perspective. So, but let's come back to the recovery and investment things. I'm very actually happy that we have here colleagues from Italian Investment Bank as well as Pani Czerwinska here from European Investment Bank, because I consider once again that we should deeply involve private sector, Ukrainian private sector, but also European in reconstruction and in recovery of economics. What I consider quite interested, and I would really pay your attention on this fact is that despite the war risks, as you asked, should we consider recovery or investment during the war? So despite the war risk, there are sectors of economic in Ukraine which became even more attractive for domestic and foreign investors, even if you compare the situation to 2022, so before invasion. And namely, we are talking about three specific sectors. We are talking, of course, about defense production. And once again, it's great to have here Pani Czerwinska from European Investment Bank, because this is basically the first international financial organization which has started to work with defense industry, or at least durable use production. Currently, unfortunately, only with dual use production of EU member states, but we are really hoping that this program will be boosted to Ukraine, especially once again given the programs that are currently considered in Brussels. For example, the Rearm Europe, which was announced by Ursula von der Leyen and which is advocated also by Andreas Kubilius. So there is this idea of the fund or program called Rearm Europe, worth of 800 billion euros. We consider it's very good and very timely for Europe, but also it's important to understand how this program will be implemented, what players will be there, what will be the financial institutions that will participate and implement these programs. And I believe that European Investment Bank as well as national investment banks can actually play a leading role there in the implementation. But then we should reconsider the framework and make sure that Ukraine can participate in these programs already. So the defense industry is the first sector which became even more attractive for foreign investors. The second sector is building materials, and I believe that Italian companies can actually have a greater participation in that, especially with the support of CDP or Italian government, and this is something that we should consider and maybe think about some bilateral agreements that we can prepare and sign during the URC, the Ukraine Recovery Conference. And the third sector is, of course, energy, because our energy infrastructure, especially the old huge plants built during the USSR, were damaged by Russian occupants, and now we reconsider how we see our energy infrastructure. So we want it decentralized, we want it to be as close as possible to the final consumer, and that's why we need a lot of investment, and I believe not only state investment but private investors. But on top of that, to finish my speech, I want to say that we see that actually investment continue taking place, and we see here special thanks to PMI. I also, on my behalf, would like to thank this company, because once again, despite the war risks, they have built a huge production in the west of Ukraine worth of $20 million just last year. So we see that investments are taking place, that internal market is still there. There are opportunities, and we invite private sector to come to Ukraine to build partnership, to participate in recovery. But it's very important to actually start exploring opportunities already now. Start finding local partners, start negotiations with European and as well as local investment banks, start maybe finding some locations or some sector to invest in. So you're welcome. I will be happy to be your friend, your partner in Ukraine, and to help you to invest in better, safer Europe tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Yanchenko, for your remarks. Everything is crystal clear on your side. So it's time to hear Mr. Tomasz Ochirmovitz. I'm sorry, my Polish is quite rust. Future of Ukraine global leader, Deloitte, Central Europe. I know you have some slides to show us. Is it correct?
I'm not sure how it's going to work, but probably talk for the slides.
Is anybody working on that? I don't know.
Let's oh, I have a shorter time now, 5:30. I'm supposed to have 7 minutes.
Yes.
You're cutting my time.
No,
Anyways,
no.
maybe,
Anyway.
without the slides, I will maybe say a few words about
Okay.
our future of Ukraine practice, specifically in the aspect of Ukraine reconstruction. And I'll say a few words about Deloitte in Ukraine, our global practice future of Ukraine, not because to boast about what Deloitte is doing, but mostly to encourage you, your colleagues, your counterparties, maybe to establish something similar, because it will take a village to rebuild Ukraine. It's not only Ukraine, it's not only a few multilateral institutions, but as you will see, and as what was said here, it's a combination of government of Ukraine, different hromadas, regional governments, European governments, and private sector. It was mentioned before by Ms. Czerwińska that now the rapid damage assessment says it's about 500 billion cost, and the cost is still mounting. A year ago it was 400 billion. We believe it's going to be trillion for next 10 to 15 years, especially if we take the principle of building back better. And as Deloitte, we have 450,000 people globally. We have probably the biggest public sector practice, although Dodge is doing everything to make us smaller, but we still have a significant public practice, and believe that our competencies, especially in terms of the funding, financing, restructuring plans, human capital, integrity, and EU accession will be particularly useful in Ukraine. And moreover, our clients, so public clients and private clients, will be able to mobilize them for the purposes of Ukraine reconstruction. How do you help? Well, first of all, you start with government of Ukraine, understanding government of Ukraine priorities, and you do it. Why do you get involved in the reconstruction at all? One, purpose is one thing. Yes, we need to help Ukrainians because they deserve it, but there is a big business benefit of Ukraine's reconstruction. I think this would be one of those pivotal moments in the history of Europe, just like Central European countries who joined European Union changed the European Union and provided additional prosperity. And I remember when Poland joined EU, and that was the situation before the Poland joined EU, and what we see now in Poland. And in terms of GDP, which is now bigger than some of the other European countries, the fact that the train ride between Warsaw and Gdańsk used to take 6 hours, now it's 2.5 hours. An ability to connect with other European countries, and the fact that Central European economies are sort of the wheel that also drives European Union economy. And Ukraine has the same potential, if not bigger. If you think about 30 million people, huge landmass, it will contribute to our prosperity and our security in a number of ways. So first of all, it was mentioned the army. Ukraine probably has now the biggest army in Europe. And it's probably the most trained army and the most interoperable. So their forces know how to actually talk to each other and collaborate with each other. That combined with the new technology, Ukraine has the best drone industry now probably in Europe. The Ukrainian production of arms went from 1 billion in 2022 to
35 billion.
10 billion last year,
35.
and it's going to be 35 billion this year. $35 billion worth of production. How it was ramped up. And we're talking about building, rearming Europe. Here's our partner with whom we should be setting up joint ventures, production in Ukraine or in neighboring countries or elsewhere using that technology. Energy, massive land for wind, solar, biogas. That will create European energy security, including the nuclear energy that Ukraine has now. agriculture. Ukraine has probably now 20% of the world's wheat production, and if Europe wants to be relevant in the global food security, we need to have Ukraine. Not mentioning AI, digital skills, and so on. So that's a significant potential and chance for Europe, or to make Europe great again, to paraphrase some people. But it's not, unfortunately, it's not an easy challenge. Number one, resources, and especially people resources. If you go to Kiev, and I happen to go every month, you see that although people are committed, they are tired. You can see they are tired. They're working enormously. I mean, from the everybody to the people to government of Ukraine. 200 reforms, 400 conditionalities implemented or being implemented. So human capital will be a challenge. People internally displaced people coming from the front lines. A lot of people left. So that we need to find the way how we can retrain people, augment them with modern digital tools, or even artificial intelligence, so that they can plan and execute the reconstruction. Energy sector certainly needs the rebuild, and significantly different rebuild that was before. In order to do that, we need to de-risk investments. There is a lot of de-risking instruments, but they're not yet commonly applied. It's not sufficient. Of course, integrity and use of funds will be big issue, and you can probably hear that things will happen, and you will hear because Ukraine is committed to getting them out. But there needs to be tools, again, including maybe some digital tools, where you would monitor use of funds and integrity, transparency constantly, not after 5 years or 7 years review the projects. Each project needs to be reviewed at the moment. And the last one, Ms. Czerwinska mentioned that, is the absorption capacity. The projects need to be prepared. They need to be prepared by people who need to be qualified to do it, and Ukraine has only some of the people now, and it's certainly not enough. So absorption capacity, the ability to prepare bankable projects, submitting them to KFWs and EIBs and EBRDs of the world.
Thank you so much. So I think maybe we can skip directly to the questions from the floor. If you have any, please raise your hand and identify yourself. I'm sure that somebody has good questions for our friends. Anybody? In the back? Over there. I don't know if somebody is hanging a mic for our friend. Yeah. I think that gentleman need a mic. Okay, I will do that.
No.
It's coming.
Okay, great. We solved the problem.
Thank you, Salvatore Zecchini, former professor and many other capacities. I have a question in 2 points. We have seen in the past few months the Americans putting a big foothold on the exploitation of rare minerals in Ukraine. Furthermore, as we all know, there is a significant disparities in the amount and effectiveness of support to the defense of Ukraine among supporting countries. So my question is Ukraine thinking about preferences, or to better say preferential treatments, in giving priority to some countries versus others in allocating these contracts? And second, how do they see cooperation with the European Union, not only in terms of reconstruction after the war, but in terms of political interaction? Right now we are experiencing an increasing hiatus across the Atlantic. So it would be interesting to have some comments on these 2 points. Thank you.
Thank you. So both questions, I think that the question is for our MP. Both
Okay.
question has to face the biggest question, which is Donald Trump.
Yeah, yeah. An elephant in the room. So,
And we are in a very big room.
yeah,
So
yeah. And still we see the elephant, yeah?
That's the problem.
Okay, so to answer your question, and many thanks for this question because they're very good and it's good to actually uncover how we see it. First, about the deal on rare minerals with Americans.
President Zelensky has not signed
Yet.
nothing.
Yet. Has
You
not signed it yet. And I should tell you that there were at least 5 versions of this agreement within the 2 weeks. Within the 2 weeks when we firstly received the draft agreement and the draft agreement which was sent back. So, but generally, it's not the exploitation of Ukraine, and this is something that we don't really tolerate. We tolerate and we invite governments and companies to come and invest together. This is our interest. This is something that we really look forward for, especially when we're talking about reconstruction, or I prefer using the term recovery, economic recovery. We really want to follow German and Japan post-war experience of recovery when the focus was on economics, on reforms, on liberal reforms, and when the leading role was actually played by private sector as well as specific state organizations, financial organizations which helped actually business to develop, like KfW or Hermes or others when we are talking about Germany. But so when we're talking about this agreement, what we want to communicate to Americans and what we finally send them is an opportunity to invest together in exploring the places where these minerals are taking place, in actually like drilling them, and what is important for us, processing them in Ukraine. This is both logical, this is both efficient in terms of logistic and economics, generally the calculation, but this is also good for Ukraine recovery, and this is something that Ukrainian people will appreciate. And Ukraine is a very democratic country which where people in society are playing leading role, and they don't let the presidents do whatever they want. We are like very traditional democratic in these things. So, as I said, we are very interested, and we are inviting governments and private sector to come and invest together and use this opportunity, but not exploiting. So we are inviting European countries as well, and many countries already received this invitation and are using this invitation. As I told you, and this might be a sector very interesting for Italian private sector, investment in production which produces their reconstruction material or construction material. I can name you at least 10 projects, 10 productions worth from $10 million to $300 million, which were started during the full-scale invasion. And there are countries from all over the Europe, like Germany, like Ireland, like let me just give you some name. So German company Kreisel invested 12 million euros with the support of German bank KfW just a year ago. Kingspan Group invested $280 million in the production of like six campuses, also in building material. Ukrainian development company City One Development invested 100 million euros in the plan for reconstruction in central Ukraine. AFI Group, this is an international basically organization, invested $232 million. So there are investment projects that are taking place already, and there are both Ukrainian companies, European companies, but also joint ventures. And this is something that we invite you all to participate. But let me come back to the points that I raised during my introductory speech. The military defense is something that is really very interesting for European, but also generally Western companies, because we don't only have the place to build this production, we don't only have the very unique human resource, because we are talking about veterans who came to the front line as volunteers with various background from engineering, managers of businesses, etc. Yeah, etc., etc. And now they also have the experience of how actually the modern war looks like, and they are the source of these fantastic military innovations. And this is something that European companies are seeking for. They understand that Ukraine possesses unique opportunity, unique ecosystem, the quickest cycle of innovation. And this is something where we want to see European companies to participate with Ukrainian private sector more. And believe me, this is much more attractive, much more strategic than any kind of mineral things where investment cycle is taking place for 5, 10, or 15 years. So please come and plan security projects, military defense with us. This is something that we can do together to make sure that our part of the world become safer and more secure, and we can do it together.
Thanks very much. Any questions around? We see, okay, 1, 2, 3. I think we can take all together the questions. Yes, please. So we save time because we have more or less 12 minutes. We start from the lady here, just in front of me.
Thank you so much. My name is Laura Jakes. I'm a reporter with the New York Times. I have been looking at reconstruction of post-conflict issues in Iraq and Gaza. So I have two questions for everybody, I suppose. One, how does this work? I'm not sure I heard the answer to our panel, our moderator's initial questions, which was, how does this work in ambiguous security situations? And two, what are the donors and donor companies looking to do in terms of making sure that this money that's invested doesn't unfortunately disappear?
It's the issue of corruption. We can get the other two questions. There is a period. No. Okay.
Benedetto Ligorio, historian. Just a question for Lady Yanchenko. There is any opportunity to preserve the integrality of and unity of the territory of Ukraine in this historical phase, and there is some opportunity to preserve the strategical infrastructure of Ukraine, not only minerals, who are the richness of the people of Ukraine, but also the strategical infrastructure like Bratiza and Sayuza, who were the connection between Ukraine and Europe, for example, about gas. And at the same time, if there is any possibility of a multicultural state in Ukrainian Europe. Thank you.
So we have time for another question. There was a man or a lady, I don't remember.
Thank you very much. Sandra Di Tanna, an auditor. My question is very simple. Have the funds which we have been made available to Ukraine, as we heard, do they have the connotation of a loan? And if so, has the government of Ukraine been fully informed about this? Thank you.
So I think President Trump will be very interested in your question. So we start from the corruption, and then
transparency.
Yeah,
integrity.
that's the big question. The second elephant in the room.
Well, the first one, Laura, ask if I may, on the ambiguity of security situation, and
can we reconstruct now?
I can reconstruct now, and
before
it
a ceasefire.
It was mentioned before. I mean, Marshall Plan was developed in 1943, 44, and implemented 48 only. So it took a lot of planning. Now Ukraine does a lot of planning, does a lot of reforming. Now working on the foreign direct investment law. I think maybe by URC it will be announced. Some restoration is happening now, but it's really small, a couple billion euros. So mostly to build back, cover some energy generation assets, some road here, there. It's certainly not sufficient. But there are regions in Ukraine, especially Western Ukraine, which have not been affected by the war completely. If you look at the Western Ukraine, there are areas that have not.
Poland, for example.
Well, Lviv has been targeted, but if you go further south towards Slovakia, Uzhgorod, and then towards Hungary and then Moldova, then they haven't been touched at all. So that's sort of one point to take into account. The second, after 2 years, there are mechanisms that protect investors from loss as a result of physical destruction as of war. So there are insurance schemes now, the war insurance schemes, which are available, be it from the Danish investment protection agency, the Polish one, the MIGA, EBRD. So there are already mechanisms that are to protect, that will protect the risk of loss.
Concerning the corruption?
Concerning the corruption, so as I mentioned, it is critical that there is continuous monitoring of the funds spent. Not after 5 years or 7 years when the auditors go back and reviews the papers, but each project, in our view, should have, 5-7% set aside for control of the execution of the funds. So that's one point. Secondly, the IT infrastructure, the digital infrastructure that Ukraine has, already allows for increased transparency of who wins the projects, at what points the company got, what was the price. And third one is what we see donors are doing is, in order to avoid or maybe streamline the use of funds, they would control or spend money directly. So rather than giving money to local institutions, they would set up the mechanism when the donor will monitor use of funds directly with the construction company or the investor that receives donor money.
So the big question: do you expect to receive loans or gifts?
We hope.
Trump's say 4%.
We hope to receive frozen Russian assets, because that will be fair. Who broke it should pay for it. So this would be the most perfect plan for everyone, for us, but also for European partners and allies. Because why should someone else pay for it? Yeah, why should European Union pay for it? Why should Ukraine pay for it? Given that this is a very black and white war, it's very clear who was aggressor. It was unprovoked, and if Russia has started all this mess, they should actually pay it. And it's important not only to to reconstruct Ukraine and to bring some fairness in this process, but this is also very important to prevent occupations and acts of aggression of Russia in the future. Ukraine was not the first victim of Russian aggression, not the full-scale invasion. So they basically, the first time when they invaded Ukraine was 2014. Before that, they invaded Georgia in 2008. Before that, they invaded Chechnya and made 2 very bloody wars there. Before that, they messed with Moldova, and Moldova still have this basically issues with Transnistria. And if Russia is not stopped, if it is not forced to actually pay and bear some responsibility, they go further. And the question will be, who is the next? Will it be Ukraine again, with our once again biggest and most motivated and most experienced army, or will it be a tiny country somewhere in the east of Europe?
Thanks very much. Mr. Petrocelli.
Can I also take the question about the transparency, because I consider it's very important as well from our colleagues from the media. So once again, I have a very specific vision on the reconstruction, and I'm trying to advocate for it both internally in Ukraine but also externally. I believe that we should really have lesson learned from Germany and Japan, who have created the private slash state organization, investment organization, but made the focus on private sector. So if we will have our Ukrainian KfW or something like that, and they will invest in private sector, and private sector will be the main beneficiary and the main actor of the reconstruction, then we don't even need to talk about the corruption or corruption risks, because it will be up to private sector to implement the project, make them efficient, make them cheaper, make them quicker, and that's how we actually decrease the amount of state officials and the amount of state. And I believe this is really great approach to mitigate all the risks on one hand, and on another hand we also have a lot of digitalization efforts which were put. I was very amazed how we actually implemented this digitalization in majority of sectors only within the past 5 years, and we are the most digitally advanced country of Europe now. So we also use it as a anti-corruption measure, because when you can receive the services using your iPhone or another phone and not going to state officials, that's how you actually abolish all kinds of corruption risk at once.
Thank you. Mr. Petrocelli, you have the honor to conclude our panel.
Yeah, no, just thank you very much. But just three final comments, also trying to react to what has been said and to some questions. First of all, so far, at least from our perspective, we deployed both budget support in the forms of grants and concessional loans. So it's a mix of the two, and I do think this is the way to go, because we need obviously to provide a strong direct support through grants, but we need also to have a broader financial commitments that cannot take the form of just grants. So I think it's a mix of the two. Second point, I mentioned before the Ukraine investment platform that we set up with the G7 financial institutions, DBRD. We agreed within that framework to rely on joint due diligence processing and information sharing, relying very much on those institutions who are on the ground in Ukraine. I'm mentioning this because I think this is very much relevant to ensure strong, let's say, credibility in the investment screening of our opportunities we are going to finance. And it's also a way to showcase how, specifically in this moment, we should go for stronger, closer cooperation among financial institutions. G7 is, we do think, a good format. European one is a good format. So we encourage streamlining of procedures for investments, but relying on those who are more able to provide a serious assessment in terms also of credibility of our investments on the ground in Ukraine, so also vis-a-vis corruption issues. Third point, we need to speed up investments. For that reasons I already mentioned, I think we need stronger commitment from public players and from European institutions. As DFIs, as Development Finance Institutions of Europe, we put forward together in a joint manner again, showcasing that it's time to join forces and to coordinate a proposal that we are submitting to European member states, national governments and European institutions and the European Commission, specifically when there is this discussion on the next MFF, the next European multi-annual budget, basically a multi-annual financial framework. We are asking and suggesting the European Commissions to put forward the idea to have 100% guarantee coverage for all investments done by development finance institutions. This basically, in a nutshell, would allow us to boost enormously the way we can provide the private money in support of long-term investments. Last point, these long-term investments should, in our perspective, should go hand in hand with a long-term package of structural reform in Ukraine. On this, we know that the Ukrainian government is fully committed also in the European perspective.
Last question in 30 seconds. Are you going to have in Ukraine snap elections?
Of course, after the end of the war, we will.
Are you confident?
In the elections after the end of the war?
The outcome.
I'm confident in elections after the end of the war.
Thanks so much. Halina Yanchenko, she's the member of the parliament, of the Ukrainian parliament and secretary of the National Investment Council. Thank you, Tomasz Oczymowicz from Deloitte, Future of Ukraine Global Leader. And thank you so much, Mr. Petrocelli from Cassa Depositi e Prestiti CDP Rome. Thank you for sharing your vision. Thank you so much. And it's my pleasure to invite to the podium an Italian senator, Mr. Francesco Boccia from the Democratic Party. You have the floor.
Please put them on, because Senator Boccia will speak in Italian. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Sandro. I will do this speech in Italian. I accepted the invitation from my but we are in a phase of great political commitment. And frankly, I didn't have time to prepare this speech in English. So that's why I will speak in Italian.
So we are experiencing a time of great uncertainty for Europe and for the entire international community. This topic is very important for us, and it is also very delicate. So also my speech can be recorded, and my speech for us opens for the first time a debate on the reconstruction of Ukraine. From the very first days of the conflict, NATO has played a crucial role in supplying support and security to Ukraine. And the unified response and the commitment of allies have been essential to counter the brutal Russian aggression. But we're also here to acknowledge the change in the scenario, which forces us to deeply reflect on the issue without any hypocrisy. On the strategic choices that we have the duty to make as European Union, and on the ability to act as a global independent actor that is also strong and united. And also we must reflect on our role inside the Atlantic Alliance. Recent declarations made by Trump's administration and also his actions, I must say, not only question support to Ukraine, but also show a tendency to exclude Kiev and the European Union from decision-making processes that are critical. The unilateral approach of the actual exclusion of Ukraine and Europe from key negotiations and not simply talking about theoretical negotiations, but concrete negotiations on the future of the country, according to me and according to my party, represent an attack on Kiev's sovereignty and Atlantic security. This mechanism raises concern on the role of the US in the next years in relation to security and NATO. So since the last approach of the US is more and more aggressive, the Italian government vis-à-vis Trump's administration has become problematic. Italy is a founding member of the European Union and it cannot navigate on uncertain terrain. So the first priority is that of guaranteeing that we create a pace on lasting foundations. And so Europe must take a clear stance and should state its commitment for peace, for multilateralism, and for the compliance with international law, which are now being questioned. So we must take initiatives to strengthen European security, and the Democratic Party group, and that is the first opposition party in Italy, deem that it is necessary to reduce our strategic reliance, and we must invest more and better in order to orient our ability in terms of defense and security. The European project is based on the knowledge that security, stability, and prosperity should not be built in an isolated manner, but instead we should collaborate. And the European Union has transformed a continent that had always been marked by conflicts in a model of political cooperation and also social cooperation and economic cooperation, always overcoming historic barriers and promoting common well-being. In the face of the challenge of the war in Ukraine, we must apply the same logic for the construction of lasting peace and the reconstruction of a country. Trump's administration, in its recent stances, has shown that reconstruction should be based on massive exploitation of strategic Ukrainian resources, reducing the country to a mere supplier of raw materials. This model of development is the opposite of what we must promote. We cannot allow that the future of a European country is decided based on logics of geopolitical or economic exploitation. The future of Ukraine, in our view, should not be that of an unstable periphery, but a country that is integrated in the European system, able to make choices for itself, and also that can flourish thanks to innovation and security. Security should not be based only on weapons or on the material reconstruction, but it should be based on solid foundations, resilient economies, and inclusive societies. So that is the real reconstruction, which is the main topic today. And also I accepted to come here to speak about it. It is not a question of concrete or railways, of electric stations. It is much more of that. It is a question of vision, of political responsibility and peace. Italy, together with the EU, probably will be amongst the main actors, we hope, and also financing countries of the reconstruction. But if we simply pay the costs of this unprecedented disaster without participating in the future design, we will all have lost a great opportunity. So tomorrow we will finance another emergency, another conflict, and another destruction. And those who are here in this room know that we face the fourth Gaza reconstruction, the fourth one. And it is clear that the past reconstructions occurred through negotiations that were different from this one. These negotiations should be a model to build security in Eastern Europe. It is an opportunity that we cannot waste or delegate to somebody else. So Italy should be the promoter of an international conference for reconstruction or reconciliation, a great multilateral plan which puts at the center not only these structures but also institutions, justice, the state of law, and civil cohabitation. European funds can be be even greater than the ones that we've mentioned, and they can be influenced by a real technological innovation and reforms and fight against corruption and a greater power of local autonomies. A real transparency, because peace is not imposed but is built through long-lasting tools and shared responsibility. But that is not enough. The war in Ukraine has shown that the actual security system in Europe is fragile and divided and not inclusive. And so we must propose a new model that is not only based on military deterrence but on multilateral dialogue and cooperation. So we need a sort of a Helsinki 2.0, a new conference on security in Europe that also engages Eastern countries, Baltic countries, which probably, once Russia turns the page, will be included in the negotiations. I was born in Puglia, in Bari, and I can tell you that we grew up watching the building of a bridge. We built San Nicola at the beginning. I can assure you that it worked well and it had its own logic. But then it blown up. The economic dimension inevitably is crucial, and so we propose a plan for Eastern Europe based on European and Italian investments in innovation, technology, and cooperation in the energy field should be based on infrastructures. That should be a priority which concerns Europe, first of all, and not the actors that now are excluding Europe from the negotiation table, because Europe shouldn't rely on external resources and should be more integrated. Italy, thanks to its diplomatic abilities and its economic weight, can guide stabilization processes which can strengthen prosperity of the entire continent. But it has to take a stance. It is a factor which will be crucial in the reconstruction, meaning the coordination between bilateral and multilateral initiatives which are necessary in order to avoid overlapping and with synergies with local actors. Our companies, universities and territories can be the protagonists of this transition. Partnerships between Italian and Ukrainian regions are almost natural. They already exist. Many local authorities are available for that. They've already done things without nobody asking for it. Real partnerships and popular democracy, and not only institutional democracy, are necessary. Our democracy is used to stimulating this kind of democracy. Also, EU and Italy should be present at the negotiations table. We can only be there. We cannot only be there for investing, for financing, but we must also make choices, and so we must have a political voice and diplomatic responsibility. Peace can be achieved also by designing another future that is and Italy has to write a history that allows it to build this kind of future, because rebuilding today does not only mean giving back, but preventing the next conflict, because we really want this conflict to be the last one, because a peace that is not long-lasting surely paves the way for the next conflict. So to conclude, the reconstruction of Ukraine represents a challenge that we must face through unit, strategic vision and decisiveness. We cannot simply respond to the damages of the conflict, but it is an opportunity to build a sustainable and prosperous future. Through a common commitment, we can consolidate our role as protagonists of reconstruction of a peace that is long-lasting, while promoting a shared security. The EU has shown through multilateralism and cooperation that it is possible to be successful in order to guarantee sustainability and growth. Today we have the opportunity to show that this model is valid and that it will allow to face today's challenge in order to build a future together. Thank you.
It is now my pleasure to invite the First Councillor Sergio Monti. He is the head of the Office for the Reconstruction of Ukraine in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. At the outset, let me thank President Minuto Rizzo, the organizers, for allowing me to intervene in this conference today. We have already heard from previous speakers how much Russia's invasions of Ukraine continues to have profound physical, social, economic and environmental impacts which will be felt for the generations. We have heard the figures of that. And they give an idea, they give a glimpse of the extent of the complexity, difficulty, of the challenge of addressing the priorities emerging from the war of aggression launched by the Russian Federation against Ukraine. This is also the background against which we are working with Kyiv as co-hosts and international partners to organize the Ukraine Recovery Conference that will be held in Rome in July, on the 10th and 11th of July this year. This will be the largest international event organized by the Italian government in 2025. The URC, as we call it, will bring together leaders from governments, members of parliaments, and representatives of international organizations, IFIs and development banks, business, local communities, and civil society. This conference continues on the annual series of high-level political events dedicated to the swift recovery and long-term reconstruction of Ukraine since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war of aggression. The conference will reflect the Lugano principle, including a whole-of-society approach to recovery through the meaningful participation of a broad range of stakeholders. Upholding the spirit of the Ukraine Reform Conference that took place since 2022, the URC will highlight as well Ukrainian reform progress in the context of its economic resilience and the EU accession process. The Rome Conference aims to be concrete and results-driven, focusing on funding, initiatives, and deliverables. The key goal is to raise awareness and mobilize continued international support and investments for the recovery and rebuild, reconstruction, reform, and modernization of Ukraine. The URC aims as well to strengthen integration with the Ukraine Donor Platform and the Business Advisory Council for effective collaboration. Another key aspect of the conference is going to be its inclusiveness. Far from being a mere business forum that involves a limited number of regional or like-minded stakeholders, the political dimension of the initiative is paramount, since the implications of this crisis concern the whole international community. Not only is the war of aggression unleashed by Russia against Ukraine a manifest violation of the UN Charter and the basic principle of international law, but the global impact of supply chains, food, energy, and environmental security highlights its broader significance. The URC therefore aims to address these challenges and expand international participation in Ukraine's recovery and reconstruction. Last year, Italy committed to building on the outcomes of Lugano, London, and Berlin, continuing the four Berlin dimensions: business, human, local, and regional, EU accession and reforms dimensions as pillars of Ukraine's recovery. Retaining this format at the Rome Conference ensures continuity and fosters a permanent process to support Ukraine's recovery. Mobilizing the private sector, first and foremost, remains critical to Ukraine's successful recovery and economic growth. To this aim, private capital is key. The URC will therefore try and address the private sector's concerns, including on security and stability, financing and insurance, rule of law, regulations, and skilled labor market. At the same time, we think it is crucial to strengthen confidence in the Ukrainian business environment and signal long-term political commitment. Ukraine recovery depends on investing in human capital as well, fostering social cohesion and addressing exclusiveness. Key challenges are, among others, the reintegration of internally displaced persons, refugees and veterans into civilian lives. The crucial importance of restoring Ukraine's human capital for the country's post-conflict recovery is an issue that is even more timely, while initiatives on a possible ceasefire are underway. I would also like to mention the fact that the relevance of, for Ukraine's future, of the protection of its cultural heritage and national identity, including through incentives for creative industries and support for the media to defend freedom of expression. Local and regional actors are key as well to Ukraine's reconstruction, building on the decentralization reform. The conference will emphasize the role of local self-governance and regional state administrations in recovery, financial access, and capacity building. Advancing European integration and the perspective of joining the EU will help aligning Ukraine's policies and institutions with European standards, driving long-term economic and resilience and social progress. In fact, not only does recovery mean addressing the destruction caused by the war, but it offers as well the opportunity to build back better on adopting innovative solutions and reforms that meet the expectations of the EU membership. Complementing the panel discussions in the framework of the main event, the Recovery Forum of the conference will provide an interactive on-site platform for Ukrainian, Italian, and international stakeholders, including local and regional authorities, IFIs, and development banks, to engage in dialogue, share experiences, matchmaking, and collaboration on how to foster the participation of the private sector to reconstruction programs and projects. In view of this very big event that will take place in July, we are already working with our Ukrainian friends and counterparts on 4 preparatory events that will lead to the conference, each one dedicated to one of the 4 dimensions that I have already addressed before. The first one took place in Milan on the 5th of March, the second on business, the second on the civil society has taken place in Kiev last week, while the next one will see the EU reform at the center of an event in Brussels. This process on the road to URC 2025 will see the last moment, the last step in Verona in the first half of next month. With this, I thank you very much for your attention, and thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am Alessandro Cassieri. I'm an Italian journalist of RAI, the Italian Public National Television. I am a former correspondent, a permanent correspondent from Brussels, from Moscow, and I was also chief of bureau in Paris. But a significant part of my professional life was spent too in Ukraine. That's why I think the Ambassador Minuto Rizzo and the director of the foundation, Alessandro Politi, want that I was here today, and I am eager to invite the protagonists of this panel to come on the stage, starting with Lady Oksana Sheft. Please, from here. Okay. The other side is okay. And with me also, please, another guest coming from Ukraine, please. This is the Deputy Oleksiy Ustenko, please, and the Italian General of Guardia di Finanza, Generale Giordano. Please. We listen with big, strong, careful attention the speech that were on the stage in the two first sessions today. And I think that they were very, very, very interesting, but I think also that our third session will be at the same level interesting, because we have to cover maybe the hardest part of this high-level conference. We have to cover the aspect that we can call the foggy part of the problem. The reconstruction with its problem. We listened before in the second session that the transparency and the corruption are on the air every time. We have to speak about investment, about orders, about cooperation. And that's why during our panel we can face the question that are under the floor. We are talking about the foggy part of the economy, the finance, all kinds of supplies. We are talking about illegal trafficking, smuggling, counterfeiting, but also cyber threats and hybrid warfare. All elements that during a war, as now, are worryingly growing. And so the question, or more, the questions are about how to reduce these risks as much as possible, because the affair is hard. There were reports from the European Parliament in the past, and there are some reports from Defense Department of USA, the Pentagon. We have to check something more. And so we start with this kind of question, starting with a specialist of this kind of problem, as Generale Giordano. Vito Giordano is the head of the second department of the General Command of the Finance Police. Please, Generale.
Grazie, grazie Direttore.
Thank you. Thank you, Director, for giving me the floor. And first of all, I would like to thank the President of the NATO Defense College for inviting the Guardia di Finanza here. And I'm here today to explain the role of Guardia di Finanza in defending the economic and financial interests of our country from blended threats. As the Director was telling before, we are talking about threats that involve traditional threats, but also threats deriving from new technologies. As a matter of fact, global security is a key aspect of the well-being and prosperity of any nation. In an increasingly interconnected and complex world, security challenges are multiplying and diversifying. Therefore, they require an increasingly integrated and cross-cutting approach. In the past, the legal good of security had a different connotation from the economic and financial one. Instead, nowadays, it perfectly includes also those aspects. And threats to a country's economic and financial system often come in a non-explicit manner. This is why we often talk about blended threats, and that threats may take the form of trade wars, cyber attacks, natural disasters, political instabilities, just to mention a few. And from the dynamism that distinguishes the current international situation, criminal organizations often put in place increasingly sophisticated and complex fraud systems, requiring an adequate response by the country systems. We are talking about smuggling of energy products, smuggling of cigarettes, for example, as well as the exploitation and distorted use of new technologies. We are talking about crypto assets and the use of the so-called underground banking, that making use of new technologies put the use in a distorted manner the economic system, so to say. Therefore, in recent years, the global economy has been marked by technological innovations, which, while on the one hand have favored the spread of new forms of investment and wealth transfer, on the other hand have led to a marked increase in both financial and monetary risks. Let us think, for example, of the exploitation of crypto assets, which guarantee anonymity and they can be immediately transferred, thus eluding anti-money laundering and countering the financing of terrorism. Furthermore, this phenomenon is also associated with the reduction of the distance between companies and the markets as a result of the digital economy. In this case, very important is the so-called ability to pay and the determination of the ability to pay. It is very much clear that if we think of the publication by Instat, the National Statistics Institute, in 2022, the value of the unobserved economy in Italy amounted to about 201 billion euros, with a growth compared to 2021. These are significant figures that can be put in relation to illegal activities which generated a negative impact in terms of GDP development, and this impoverishment of resources represents a serious obstacle to economic development as it distorts competition and undermines the relationship of trust between citizens and the state. And then, of course, it also penalizes equity. International bodies do play a decisive role in countering these phenomena because they help to facilitate the development and refinement of regulatory policies at national level in order to encourage the exchange of information. Let us think of combating cross-border crimes and cooperation within the European Union and at an international level. This is all very necessary to face and fight against these phenomena, especially through monitoring and control of financial flows. Financial flows do represent a very important element of this process, and they allow to trace the underlying illegal activities. Such a kind of exchange requires a set of cooperations and partnerships with the people working with us and with our allies, and also a network of experts residing abroad at foreign embassies, for example, so to enhance these forms of cooperation. And before concluding my intervention, I wanted to tell you something. It is all the more clear that we need to put in place a stronger cooperation between public and private sector, as is already the case in the anti-laundering system, which is based on a strong cooperation between financial intermediaries and non-financial intermediaries. So we require an international cooperation that, from the one hand, requires a higher effort in managing flows of information, but on the other hand, it is for sure the adequate response to fight against these forms of illegality. Thank you.
This speech introduced, starting from Italian example, that is a country without a war right now, and the problems that all the countries has to counter. And the question is to Lady Oksana Shvets, that she's a relevant role because she is chief policy officer of the American Chamber in Kiev. How do you think which are the best practice to counter these risks that in a country in the world during 3 years is effectively under pressure?
Thank you. Good afternoon, dear ladies, gentlemen. Thank you for having me today with you. It's my honor and pleasure to represent the American Chamber of Commerce in Ukraine. So let me just start with a couple of words from our side, who we are, what we are doing in Ukraine. We at the AmCham are proud to unite and lead the business community of over 600 big international European, American, Ukrainian companies. We work hand in hand with companies that continue to believe in Ukraine's future despite all the challenging times we are going through now. I would start from the optimistic note that Ukraine is open for business. And despite the hardships caused by Russia's full-scale war, the resilience of the private sector has been remarkable. Today, 85% of our member companies are fully operational. And even more, over 200 new members have joined AmCham since the full-scale war started in 2022, which is a clear signal that forward-looking investors see Ukraine not just as a heart of resilience, but as a country of future growth, innovation, and opportunity. Yes, we have, obviously, we have a number of challenges. We asked our members about key challenges they facing now during the full-scale invasion, and of course the first one is coming from the need of human capital. It's establishing a clear and transparent reservation procedure. The second one is implementing real and effective judicial reform. And the third one is ensuring predictability and stability in tax legislation. So according to our surveys, around 40% of AmCham companies' physical assets, I mean factories, warehouses, offices, been damaged during the war. Also, 31% of companies have instances of employees injured, and 29 have instances of employees killed. 84% of AmCham members have employees who are serving in the armed forces of Ukraine. So definitely it's risky to invest in Ukraine now, but we always say it's riskier not to invest in Ukraine. Companies see opportunities in such areas as security and defense, which is obvious, infrastructure and construction, agriculture, IT and technology, energy and renewables, high-tech production. These areas are of particular interest. Within AmCham Ukraine, we are working closely on combating the shadow economy. Why? It's of our interest because definitely existing of shadow markets distort competition and of course, it causes tax losses to the state budget. We focused on 5 key industries, which is tobacco, because it has the huge number of losses, because this industry is paying a lot of taxes, and it's back in 2023, the share of illicit market of tobacco products in Ukraine reached over 25% and cost over 600 million US dollars tax losses during a year. So in 2024, thanks to joint efforts of law enforcement agencies, of members of parliament, including Mr. Ustenko, we have with us today, including Halina Yanchenko, who's been present during the previous conversation, and others, thanks to these joint efforts, we reached actually a decrease in this number, and last year we ended with 12% of illicit market of tobacco products. Today, actually, right today, we have the new results of Kantar survey showing us that the illegal market starting to grow again. So we will be closely monitoring this, and we'll have definitely discussions with state authorities to ensure that all measures are made to achieve the result, the tangible result, which is wanted by business community. Also, I mentioned that we are working on 5 industries. Tobacco is the biggest one because of the numbers, and also we are working on e-commerce and retail issues. We're working on HoReCa issues, on fixed internet providers issues, and this we also have we see problems within some other areas, like grain, like pharmaceutical, alcohol, fuel, and some other, and we believe that it is crucial to join efforts for all law enforcement agencies, state bodies, for government, for parliament, to tackle the issue and to find these most effective measures to be implemented to combat the shadow economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Oksana. It was very interesting, and I will answer the question in a more political way to the deputy of the Suprema Rada. We see the Verkhovna Rada is Alexei Ustenko. We listened before in the second session that private investment have to face the some risks right now in Ukraine. And we know also that President Zelensky did more than one reshuffle about the people that was around him, but also that managed a lot of relation, economical and not only economical relation with Western countries. What new about this kind of risk? Because which is the new solution that the government, the president, is adopting to guarantee more check of the aids or the investment that are coming in Ukraine?
Yes, thank you very much for your question, and maybe Italian pronunciation not so good, but buonasera a tutti, yes, if it's correct. I'm Alexei Ustenko. I'm a member of Ukrainian Parliament, the member of Committee of Tax and Bankings, and head of subcommittee. So now you know the most. There's lots of stuff about what business is curious or about the investors who come to Ukraine, we could not say that nobody is coming. Even in the wartime, there are lots of foreign companies, our Ukrainian companies, who are investing in Ukraine. I mean, Ukrainian business, they do, lots of connections between them and other countries, especially that works in gas, oil, production of clothes, production of other products. And so that's important for us, to be the part of EU as soon as possible, because our economic could live and could, be alive when we would be the part of EU, the part of big global markets. Because of course there's lots of things that are ruined now. I represent the Poltava region, and Poltava region in Ukraine, it's the eastern part, northeast. So we're near to the front line, and we're 100 kilometers from the active war and 120 kilometers to the Russian border. So, when the alarm is on, the missiles fly to us for 30 seconds or even lesser. A couple of months ago, we had, the missile attack on our university in Poltava. More than 100 people were killed because it was the lunchtime when the Russian attacked. So now Russia attacks our oil and gas infrastructure, because Poltava region is producing oil and gas. So we're like small Kuwait, because 60% of all gas that is produced in Ukraine are produced in Poltava region, and now all the gas fields are being bombed by Russia. So they're just doing it almost every day, by drones, by missiles, by rockets, anyway. So of course there are risks for investors that if they build something in Poltava region, it could be just ruined by a Russian rocket for 30 seconds. And there's a problem that lots of fabrics, lots of companies in European Union, they don't want to sign any contracts with companies that is on the other side of the river Dnipro, because they say, okay, we don't know, your factory could be ruined anytime, and our contracts would not be done. And that's a very big problem for all the companies that are in Poltava, in Cherkasy, in Kiev, in Kharkiv, because the only market, now for them is the local Ukrainian market. So in Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine, we did a lot of homework. We're fighting, the topic that you were facing and that you were talking about was the topic about the illegal markets. Of course, in Verkhovna Rada, we're fighting for the illegal markets not to be in Ukraine, because we understand that now all our taxes is our safeness, and all taxes are lives of our soldiers, all taxes are the weapons, all our taxes is the medicine for the soldiers, so that we need to understand that all illegal business, they don't pay anything. So of course 20% of the illegal market that we had in a couple of years ago, we were fighting it. We were always on the committee, we were talking about that. We were talking with our police and with our intelligence about that. Okay, look, if this would happen, it's like billions that would be going out from our budget. So of course this is the topic number one. We're fighting the illegal markets. It's usually in Ukraine, it was very big because we had those illegal fabrics, we had illegal markets. It didn't happen when Zelensky came or when the war started. It was all the time, starting from 1991. So that's why we're fighting this problem. We did the anti-corruption court. We did, lots of things for anti-corruption, because we understand that historically all, countries on the eastern part of Europe, they had the problem with corruption. We had to see, with eyes opened on this thing, and that's why we're fighting corruption. And there's lots of cases where when people are already jailed who was caught in corruption. It was impossible like 10 years ago in Ukraine. Nobody from parliament or from some ministers or from some officials, they would never be put in jail. Now we have lots of cases when people who had cases of corruption, they're now jailed.
Can you say that you are winning this fighting? Can you say that you are winning this fighting against corruption?
Yes, I can say that it's a process, and we understand that if we will have the corruption, there's no future for the country with corruption. So that's why we fight, because in Europe, in United States, in other countries that grow fast, they had good democracy. There's no corruption, or it is very, 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 very low level. So that's why we need to do these instruments to fight the corruption, and because corruption is illegal markets. Illegal markets, it's no taxes. No taxes, no future, because country cannot live without money. And when this money is going away from the country, that means that country would not have investments.
In 10 seconds, oligarchs will upset this new situation?
Yes, I think, yes, we had a couple of oligarchs that now one is in, Austria waiting for the United States investigations. One is in France, and as well he is under investigation in Ukraine. So there's lots of cases, when oligarchs are being under investigation, criminal investigation as well. So it was impossible, like I thought 10 years ago in Ukraine, but now it's possible. So that's just the way, that even when we are in the war, when we have the active war, we fight corruption, and we do this infrastructure, to fight it for all our kids, our grandkids. They should live in Europe, and they should live in the country where bribes or corruption is impossible.
Thank you so much. This moment we have time for some questions. If you can give me a signal, we give you the mic. Someone that want to ask something to our guest? Maybe about the timing of the new elections?
Hi, thank you. Leave it to a journalist to ask the first question, no? I'm just curious, I'm sorry, I'm with the New York Times. You are the second and third people today I've heard talk about the illicit cigarette and tobacco imports into, or trade anyway, into Ukraine. And I'm just wondering, listening to you all, to what extent, if any, will the new American tariffs have on this illicit trade? Do you expect that there will be more turning towards illicit tobacco if the imports, and I don't know if Philip Morris Ukraine has to import very many products from the United States, but I would just be curious as to the effect that the American tariffs will have on illicit trade in Ukraine, specific to tobacco, if not other industries. Thank you.
If I may, I will start.
Both of you.
Sure. The origin of illicit tobacco market in Ukraine is a bit different. It's not illegal import. It's more about illegal production. We have several factories who are producing their tobacco products without excise stamps, without paying taxes, with fake duty-free marks. So we are talking about purely about illicit production internal illicit production in Ukraine. We have all 4 big international tobacco companies in Ukraine, and they own 4 factories in Ukraine. It's British American Tobacco, it's JTI, it's Imperial Tobacco, and it's Philip Morris, who last year they opens a new factory because the previous one is too close to the Russian border and it's dangerous to work there, and they invested and opens a new factory closer to the western border of Ukraine near Lviv. So they are producing legal products, legal tobacco products in Ukraine, and we have unfortunately players who are producing illegal. So that's the origin of the illicit tobacco market in Ukraine.
Thank you for the question. I'll add that really there's lots of fabrics that produce cigarettes, legal cigarettes in Ukraine, like in Poltava region. I think it's Japan, yes?
Yes,
Japan, yeah.
GTI.
GTI, that is in Poltava region, in Kremenchuk. Anyway, we're near to the front line, but they're producing it. It's a little bit farther than the fabric of Philip Morris. Anyway, there are fabrics that produce illegal cigarettes. So the fabrics, they are legal, but they do some products that are illegal. You know, they find some cases in law that they can turn around or what they can make. Like they produce duty-free. Okay, they produce it. You, like a country, you cannot say, okay, don't produce duty-free cigarettes because we understand that there's a market of duty-free. But okay, we, like a committee, we asked for the statistic of Ministry of Economy, and we asked them how many cigarettes were sold in the duty-free shops. Now we have not much duty-frees because we don't have airports. They're not working now. We have it, but they're not working. We have duty-free shops only on the board, and there's a couple of them, one on the Polish board, I think one on the Hungarian board. So, and you know, when I'm traveling somewhere abroad, I see that there's not many people who buy cigarettes there. And when we saw the statistic, and it was like, you know, everyone, like every people who crossed the Ukrainian board bought like 100 or 200 packages of cigarettes. So it's impossible. And that's why we voted for the law that now you cannot produce the duty-free cigarettes before the end of the war, because we understand that it is one thing how illegal factories do the illegal market. So they produce these duty-free cigarettes. They don't put it in the duty-free. They put it like on the cash on the open market. The second thing was how they did it. They produced cigarillos, not cigarettes. And it was, you know, the same case. So we made the cigarillos illegal. So it's like, you know, our committee, we work with the AmCham, with the American Chamber of Commerce, with, you know, legal producers, with, you know, anti-corruption organs, with our intelligence, and every time you're running after, you know, the illegal market, and it's like thief and policeman. So every time you have to catch, you know, how they produce it and how the illegal market does it. But you know, I think that we're winning because we had 24% of illegal market. It was in 2023. Now it's 12% of illegal market. So it's better. Of course, every time when the taxes are growing, and you know, because of the Euro directive, the price for the taxes of the cigarettes should be higher and higher and higher, and we understand as higher it goes, the more interesting it is for illegals to produce them. But anyway, we're fighting it, and you know, our ambitious plan is for the illegal market to be at least on the level of 3 or 2%, like it is in lots of European countries. I know that there's lots of countries that have problems with illegal cigarettes as well, and especially you know, Western European countries where the price for the cigarettes are very big. But anyway, in Ukraine, we're looking forward to beat this illegal market.
Alexei, thank you so much, but I can't avoid to do another small question. Nothing to say about the illegal market that concern the defense devices coming from outside, from USA, for example. Illegal market of defense articles.
No, I don't think the illegal. I don't think something is illegally imported in Ukraine.
Maybe one thing is Apple products, iPhone,
Yeah,
mostly.
if we talk about cigarettes, no.
No, cigarettes, no tobacco, no. About defense articles that were provided from USA that were under control in the last 2 years for something that they go
weapons.
out.
You're talking about weapons?
Yes.
No, weapons, there's no illegal market of weapons. No, it's controlled.
An illegal market in the sense of weapons that somewhere is sold.
No, it's, mostly it's Russian propaganda that Ukraine sells abroad weapons. No, especially we had, this commission in Verkhovna Rada, in ministry, and all the weapon is controlled. So everything that comes from United States is under very strong control. So about everything we should tell United States. So mostly, and they don't have questions to us about that. And in parliamentary, there's a big commission that works, that controls the weapon on all levels. So we're very interested in that there would be no illegal market of it, because we understand that it's our safeness. Because if the countries would stop giving us weapons, we will lose.
It was a warning from European Parliament and also from the Defense Department of the USA. In any case, Generale Giordano,
So General Giordano,
contrabbando, every kind of contrabbando. Italy, I repeat, is not a country in war, luckily, it's 8 years more or less, but it's so difficult to counter this kind of smuggling, contrabbando, every kind of. So have you any special relation with the Ukrainian devices and organization to aid and comfort this kind of fighting with them?
Yes, con l'Ucraina.
So we have collaboration and capacity building relations with Ukraine. We have the Economic Financial Police School at Asia, where we finance training or exchange of views courses also with Ukrainian colleagues that are involved and collaborate with us. As regards the fight against trafficking, smuggling, I can speak about what we do as Guardia di Finanza. This is a very complex activity. Surely it requires wide international collaboration. Based on recent seizures that we had in Italy, there's been an increase of hundreds of tons of tobacco that were treated abroad. Some of them were seized in Italy. There are trade international flows that change over time, also in relation to regional crisis, because trade flows clearly are influenced by the wars, by the crisis in the Persian Gulf, and also from other kinds of contexts. And so they change, and also the illicit trade flows change. In particular, in the most important Italian ports, there are very strict checks made by Guardia di Finanza and the Italian Customs Agency that use an international network of collaborations which is based on bilateral agreements, and also there is a network related to international organization of customs that play an important role in the exchange of information. Risk analysis of trade flows is a fundamental element. Clearly, we cannot totally eliminate this risk. but we can limit it and restrain it, also mostly through international collaboration.
Giordano, we have time for 1 minute each one. Last sentence is Oksana, 1 minute for you.
Thank you. You asked about some formulas for effective combating illicit markets, and I would use this 1 minute to also express our gratitude to Italy, particularly because during last year, when Italy been leading presidency within G7, we communicated with all international partners about this issue of illicit tobacco market, and Italy, with the help of Italy, Italian embassy in Kyiv, they issued the letter to the government and parliament asking to tackle the issue, and we believe that that was what helped to decrease this very high level of illicit tobacco market, and it's one of the instruments just to not talk to all the law enforcement agencies or state bodies, but also to unite international partners.
Alexei, something about the relation and the cooperation between the national, international, and the private system to help not only Ukrainian reconstruction, but also to help to counter the risks about it.
But the first point, thank you very much, of course, to Italy, like my Oksana told, because Italy did really a lot for Ukraine, and it was one of the first country who agreed to take our refugees from Ukraine, the mothers with children. And I know that there's lots of people from Ukraine that still live in Italy, and thank you very much for all your people and for your government that does it. We did lots of programs last year about programs of friendships between regions in Poltava regions and regions in Italia, and it's very important for this agreement of friendships, because mayors, companies from Ukraine, they begin to know mayors and companies in Italy, and the same Italian companies and mayors begin to know companies and mayors in Ukraine. So it's very important. But what should we do for business to come to reconstruction? To be, first of all, is fighting corruption. The second is, it's like our homework for all the years in future and for future parliaments. The second point is, of course, all bright anti-corruption system and all the military system. And the third point is, of course, insurance. If we would have this military insurance, and if the EU could support us, with some programs about taking the risks, the war risks, for the companies who invest in Ukraine, of course, many of them would come to Ukraine, because we have lots of opportunities. We have lots of minerals in Ukraine. We have oil and gas. We have many factories that could be invested by European companies.
Thank you so much to our guests, to our panelists. Thank you to people that waited for us. I want to thank directly the two Ukrainian guests, Oksana Shvets, I repeat, Chief Policy Officer of American Chamber in Kiev, and the Deputy Oleksiy Ustenko, Deputy of the Suprema Rada, Verkhovna Rada in Kiev. Thank you so much, e grazie al Generale Giordano. Vi invito a scendere dallo stage.
Thanks to General Giordano. Please get down at the stage.
I am pleased to introduce right now for the final remarking. It's a pleasure to have with us, et voilà. Good evening, lunga strada. let me introduce for the end of this day, for the concluding remarks, President Giulio Terzi di Sant'Agata, former Italian Foreign Minister with Mario Monti government, and actually is currently President of the Senate Committee on European Union Policies. Please, Senatore.
Thank you very much, Cassieri, and thank you everybody for being here, and especially to Ambassador Minuto Rizzo for extending the invitation to come here tonight. Here he is in the front row, as always he is. Generally is on stage, but tonight is also on the front row to be more together with everybody. Let me say, it was mentioned that I'm involved since the beginning of this legislature with the working of the Permanent Committee for European Affairs. It is called the EU Policies, and the issue of Ukraine is constantly in the working and in the references and the objectives in the policies definition of my committee, the committee I have the honor to chair. It is there as a candidate to the European Union, and we know very well that it has done a fantastic job. I cannot mention another country candidate to the European Union which has been able to develop so fast. I'm not talking about the war. I'm talking just of the process that he has installed, and that's why I'm also here to congratulate the Ukrainian guests, the Member of Parliament, and the experts from Ukraine, to congratulate them for the enormous efforts that their nation, their government, their country is doing in order to comply in full with all the different chapters that have been opened after the conference concerning the membership to the European Union. So Ukraine is a big protagonist of the European scene, and it must be a protagonist in peace, in security, in a way of developing the country with the cooperation and the partnership of European countries, all European countries, and the incoming conference in Rome for reconstruction. It was mentioned already as a major endeavor for the government. But I would like to begin my words by saying that willing or not, there is a saying which maybe is less quoted in the Far East, in Asia nowadays. We are living, may you live in interesting times. That was a good wish. Maybe such good wish nowadays has reverted, because the interesting times seem to be not necessarily times of prosperity, but unfortunately are times of upheaval, times of uncertainty, and we saw where the stock exchange is going over the last 3-4 days. But this is not the reality that I would like to prospect to you tonight in my simple words. These interesting times are times where we have, first and foremost, look at a world which is moving very fast in a way which seems to break in depth the globality, all the rules of foreign trade, foreign investment, insurances, legality, the prohibition of the use of force, and the implementation of the obligation of each component of the international community to respect international treaties, the treaties concerning commerce, concerning financial transfers, and concerning especially the cooperative security all over. But this is in fact a world where the announcement a few days ago of new heavy tariffs even for the European Union countries is so difficult to understand and to predict. But what I share personally is the fact that we don't have to predict disasters or ring alarms which which are already ringing in a number of quarters, we should make sure that there is a quieter and more well-grounded and reasonable approach to the things which are going on. And this, quite frankly, is the vision of not only political, the political force, the party to which I belong, the Brothers of Italy, but it is a sincere vision of the coalition that on which the government is based, and I will say also of the other components of the international political spectrum in Europe. I'm not here to make a political discourse, although there is a very fundamental principle. I have been dealing with foreign affairs in various capacities for many, many years, and I've always believed that the national interest requires always a largest and strongest possible involvement and cohesion of a nation to be effective in foreign policy. And so I'm a little bit disconcerted when I hear and I listen. Of course, there is the game, the dialogue, or even the infighting between majority and the opposition. But I am always sorry, a little not particularly happy when I listen to statements and positions which foresee some conclusions in a government behavior which take for granted this line and the strategy, the line strategy on the government is already sold to a surrender, to a renunciation of the fundamental values and the things which are always in front of us. So sometimes it is as if talking about European security and European defense, we are acting against the nature of the European Union, of the European integration, because we have to imagine, to dream that just shouting, we want peace, we want to disarm, we are against any expenditure for aimed at defense and security, we want to stay out of all of this. This is the contrary to the nature of the European integration, while this is exactly the opposite. It is exactly the opposite when we remember that one of the biggest sorrow, I would say even one of the biggest trauma of Alcide De Gasperi of the last few months, perhaps a few years of his life, especially until the end, he was a staunch supporter with Konrad Adenauer and other European leaders of the time, of the CED, the Communauté Européenne de Défense, the European Community for Defense. And from then on, the whole effort in Europe has been to go ahead and to construe in another format, within the NATO alliance, within the North Atlantic Alliance, a group of European countries capable, and they have been during the war, during the Cold War, no doubt they have been capable during the Cold War to be well equipped, although their governments were very much involved in welfare policies, in policy of education, policies on social progress of their own countries, in economic, scientific research, and so on. At the same time, they were able to keep, I remember some figures that I from, by chance, I got from what was, for instance, the German army in terms of tanks until 88, 89, before the so-called peace dividend came the word used in Europe and in the world for more than 10 years, they had an availability of operational, ready to deploy in the thousands of tanks, only tanks, 5, 6, 7,000. Ambassador Ministro knows better than me, but I think that this is roughly the figure. And nowadays, the same country, I think, disposes of, the figures that are in the press, in the media, perhaps of 1/10 of that capacity. On the other side of the frontier, we have an aggressor. We have a terrible aggressor which wants to destroy completely a nation, which is an heroic nation, which is defending, which is surviving and wants to survive to defend Europe, to defend its European values, its European principle, the fact that, as I was mentioning in the beginning, the access to the European Union, because they are free. They believe they are free and they want to fight until the end of the position when they will be able to get a just peace. They want to fight until that point because they believe that they're surely convinced that without freedom there is no reason to exist, not only as a country, but perhaps even as individuals, although sometimes we read about people who are saying, oh, I prefer to be alive and perhaps a slave of somebody else. It depends, but the force of freedom and the values is deeply felt by our Ukrainian friends, and that's why they are defending, they are saying every day that they are defending Europe in that sense. So why there is a stalemate in what we have been seeing, and I believe that also what's said by by the State Foreign Secretary Rubio, the Secretary of State Rubio, at the NATO meeting of foreign ministers a couple of days ago, and what it was reiterated by President Trump to the President of Finland, again, just a few days ago. Two different things. Rubio said, no doubt, that the US is involved and is a partner, as it always been, in NATO, in the NATO alliance, and President Trump said at the moment, or it has been reported that he was commenting the position of President Putin not cooperative in defining a ceasefire on Ukraine. He was using some very negative and critical expression vis-à-vis President Putin. I'm mentioning this episode because it shows that we cannot take in any way, in any possible way, for granted the fact that there is a separation between the United States and our North Atlantic partners and the European partners. We know that it's very difficult, the negotiation on tariffs, but this is an element which pertains to the economic realm, to the question of free trade, which has to be, and is under the eyes of everybody. Free trade, the global free trade as it was into existence since the creation of WTO, but especially since 35 years ago, has been affected by double standards, not only double standards, but also abuse of the exchanges in order to invade foreign markets without equal status in labor conditions, for instance, or in state aids, or in conditions of intellectual property. And that is something that we have suffered. Our Western countries have terribly suffered because we have lost working places, we have lost labor opportunities massively. It is something that has happened, and we are suffering socially and economically in our nations because of that, and there is no way that it has to be reshaped. So are the custom duties, as these heavy custom duties, the right way to go? I'm convinced that is personal conviction. It is wrong, and I think this is a conviction. I think also the European Union has clearly stated by the European institutions. But that means that we have to keep the logic of the ongoing negotiation and to understand not only the margin, but the principle on which we have to base free trade among between European and Americans, between European Americans and the rest of the world. I think that this is an aspect that, in my opinion, must be clearly focused, but also kept on another table in comparison with security and defense, to which I want to come very quickly on this point. The key word is the pillar of European countries. The NATO members, which are European member states, and which are not neutral and therefore belong to NATO, 32 European countries. This pillar, there is no doubt, must be solidified much more than it is now, and much be recognized an autonomous capacity. What does it mean, autonomous capacity? It means a number of things. It means integration of industrial production in much fewer programs among the different European industries. The differences between our industrial defense competitors in the United States, for instance, is enormous. We have around 300 different programs for major weapon productions or defense production, and the United States only a few dozen. And the efficiency at the equal level of expenditures is tens of times lower than the American competitors. So that shows why Europe buys already so much of their supplies for defense, security and defense, so high percentage of American technologies and American components. So the European pillar means that integration in the industrial base for defense in a wider sense is not only of weapon, and perhaps is not that much about weapon, but is much more on hybrid threats, which is the specialty of an aggressor like Russia. Hybrid threats means subtle disinformation. The report of our intelligence a few weeks ago presented to Parliament said very specifically that from Russia there is a huge increase of aggression through hybrid system, programs and so on. It is 1,000 of attacks per day addressed to our companies, subtraction of data, of knowledge, intelligence which is deployed through those aggression, but also economic value of data which is taken away and from attacks which are attributed in many cases to Russian hackers, to organizations which respond to Russian hackers. So defense in that realm is absolutely important, and it has a priority. And that is a real, yes, that can be qualified as defense, but can be qualified also as a security of our iPhone or our computer and office network, or the data which are used for artificial intelligence also of the European companies. So it is really to be understood by the public opinion what we are talking about when we are talking about defense and security and the European pillar within the Atlantic Alliance. I would like to conclude that there are two elements that I would like to add to the very short conclusion of your deliberation and this very interesting meeting. One is the false narrative which has been infused by President Putin, justifying the aggression, the criminal aggression against Ukraine and the destruction of an entire people in every branch, not only the capacity of survival in winter, electricity, but even the most important value of for their identity, language, culture, destruction of libraries, of universities, or beyond the destruction of hospitals, schools, universities, and so on. So a genocidal war, it is not an abuse of that term, because when you're talking about what is going on in Ukraine, and you look again and you look at the Convention for the Fight Against Genocide, you realize that on the 5 conditions to understand that an aggression is genocide and is a crime of genocide, there are at least 2 or 3 which are relevant in what Putin is doing in Ukraine. Trying to eradicate, to deny the existence of a nation, the existence of a culture, of a language, and even to taking away tens of thousands of children in order to russify them far from their parents. And there is another horrible crime which has been in the agenda of the different European Council for many months, and on which we are particularly active as an Italian group also in the European Parliament. But to talk about this is also important to understand how deep and diffuse are the lies that Putin's propaganda, Putin disinformation puts around when he says, oh, the ceasefire will not be implemented until the root causes of the conflict are addressed. And this story of the root causes of the conflict, President Putin has been waving this flag since the beginning of the aggression, more than 3 years ago. Root causes being for him the membership of 15 European member states of the alliance, to 15 member states of the alliance, which, having felt freedom and the return to their own sovereign rights and human rights after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the USSR and the Warsaw Pact, have asked the alliance and shown to the other members of the alliance that they were fully respectful of the values and the principle of the Atlantic Charter. So this is something that it has to be kept in mind, because it's not well, there is no agreement, there is too much propaganda also in our countries, even in Italy, but all over Europe. The hybrid attack, the hybrid disinformation and political attack, and the way of masterminding individual consciences and individual understanding of what has been going on in the 90s. It is a terrible story which has to be clarified at every possible level, and I'm very glad that here we have a very qualified group of personalities which are in depth into these issues. And let me mention an important research which was carried on the eve of the aggression on 2021 by Emily Sarot, a prominent researcher and professor in Yale, and she wrote a book, many hundreds pages, full of references and documents and testimonies, witnesses by many people who were involved in those negotiations between Germany, United States on one side, and Gorbachev and Shevardnadze on the other. And there is not one single grain of evidence that a promise in whatever form, and even much less so in a formal way, there is no evidence that any kind of promise of assurance or assurance was given from the Americans and the Germans to the Russians that NATO would have kept its deployment, the deployment of its forces and the membership to NATO at the exclusion of the newly recognized democracies in Eastern Europe. And now Putin is putting in question all this, rewriting history and trying to refuse among our public opinions the fact that it is true whatever he says, like the Rus dreams or nightmares of the people of the center Siberia descending and promoting the Bible in the rest of the world. It is something that is not serious. Also, this disinformation is a criminal disinformation. Since I have quoted a book which has, in my opinion, a particular weight, not only physically but in terms of the seriousness of the evidences that he shows, that he has distributed. There is another important work that I was going through just before coming here, a publication, a report, an important research published by Cambridge Ukrainian Studies Center about strategies for a better resilient Europe and secure Ukraine. The authors are Dr. Victoria Vdovchenko and Dr. Elena Davlikanova. Some points, and with this I promise I end. Support Ukraine, these are the main headings in the very well-construed report and documented report. Supporting Ukraine with military aid, ensuring it remains a robust partner in European defense strategy is a first priority for a ceasefire and a subsequent just peace in Ukraine. And the other priorities are enhancing European countries' defensive posture in cooperation with Ukraine. European NATO members must recognize Ukraine as an asset to European security, not a liability. Securing the Black Sea region, reinforcing military capacity and diplomatic engagement of Mediterranean partners. Constructing a sky shield, since Ukrainian safe airspace is vital to enable Ukrainian recovery. No modern world over the last century, more than a century, has been fought successfully without the control of the air, without the capacity to defend the troops from the air. Integrating Ukraine's defense industry into the European defense technological industrial base, considering how best assuring security guarantees to Kiev, implementing policies to attract investment, rebuild infrastructure and create sustainable economic growth of Ukraine, countering Russian influence, and here is the point of this information that I was just mentioning. The research, of course, presents the Ukrainian point of view, but these are points of view which are at present now very much on the table of the North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union. So why all this? Because we want to be part of European Union and North Atlantic Alliance based on principle, on the rule of law, on freedoms. And let's conclude in Margaret Thatcher saying that you know already, and I quote, "Let us never forget that our way of life, our vision, and all we hope to achieve is secured not by the rightness of our cause, but by the strength of our defense." Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, so we are closing the day, the working day, a long day. I'm very proud as an organizer to see there are so many people sitting at this time, which is a good sign usually in conferences. It means that the program was somehow attractive. I think we have been speaking seriously through an enormous, how can I say, variety of things, going from politics into civil society, trade, and it is a big effort to organize this, but I think that we've been, I hope, successful in giving you a sort of general picture of a very complex region, a big region of an ongoing problem. And I have to thank really the moderators and the speakers for the way they have conducted the debate. I have a good news for those who wish to have good news. The good news, that for me at least, is that there is a drink upstairs, the 5th floor, open for all of us to get together, so to relax after such a serious conversation. We probably all need our refreshment. And one last thing, for those of you who, I'm sorry for these technical things, who got the translation device from Italian into English, please deposit it at the door, because otherwise we have to pay for them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Have a good dinner, a very good dinner.